Welcome to another one of my videos. You can help support this channel by subscribing and liking, and by grabbing one of my free ebooks. I'll leave a link in the upper right hand corner and in the description to my website. And now to the video. In today's video, you'll be listening to AabiLynn's Dragon Rite number 2, S-Spell, Dragon Sorcery, Might of Swords, Might of Magic. This is the third book in the series, and if you haven't already listened to the other 2 audiobooks, I'll leave links in the description so that you can start the series from the beginning. You can also sponsor these audiobooks by purchasing this ebook from Amazon, Google, Barnes & Noble, Kobo, Apple, and a few other stores. I'll leave a link to AabiLynn's Dragon Rite number 2 ebook, so if you would like to sponsor this channel, you can purchase the book. Now sit back, relax, and enjoy the read.
AabiLynn's Dragon Rite number 2, S-Spell, Dragon Sorcery, Might of Swords, Might of Magic, by Christy Lynn Higgins. Copyright 2014-2019. AabiLynn, Woman of a Sorrowful Song. Chapter 1. The Murky Black Brute. Blackfire. Kara heard Turk shout as she fled through one of the tunnels to escape her fate. She increased her limping headlong flight as trepidation pressed her on towards her grim and final act of defiance against the life fate had given her. Kara managed to escape the middle ground where Bold rejected her as a candidate. No, he did more than that. Bold humiliated and demoralized her as if they had been the greatest of enemies the entire Dragon Rite, and he finally enacted his retribution upon her for all the heinous things she had committed against him. Kara still had no idea why he hated her so. Why would the one who she loved with all her heart cast her off and utterly reject her when she needed him the most? "Come to me, my dragon," Turk yelled from a distant tunnel. I need you to get the wench. Do not let her escape." Kara heard Blackfire's great dragon cry before he left the quickening chamber and rampaged after her as if he would run over any who got in his way. The murky black brute, who was half the size of an adult dragon now, could easily tear her apart if he got a hold of her. Kara ran harder as she heard him come after her like a crazed great white grizzly bear charging for a hunter who had mistakenly wounded the beast. The image of the symbol Bork wore on his vest and headband reared and roared inside her mind. She was going to die today, there was no mistaking it, but she would decide what death she met. So Kara limped on, desperate to reach the ledge. Blackfire tracked her to the tunnel she limped through, and she yelled out in fright once she saw he hunted her down. He ran quickly through the large tunnel, grabbed her with his front talons, then flapped his massive wings, and took flight. Kara screamed again as he held her close to his fiercely beating chest, and then he flew them out of the tunnel and into a connecting one. Torches flew by in blurs as the young dragon, who was black as any pit, seized her from one grim fate and carried her to a far worse doom. She felt warmer air first, and then the bright light of the morning hit her as they flew out of the tunnel. Blackfire didn't drop her to the cliff as she thought he would. First, he headed out and circled the finger mounds as if he was searching for someone. Kara thought maybe he was searching for Turk. Blackfire headed for a different cliff than the one Kara intended to flee to and end her own life on. It was one of the huge cliffs the adult dragons used. Blackfire dropped her to the sand like an unwanted satchel, landed himself some distance from her, then turned and thundered toward her with his mouth open and dark smoke trickling out. Her horrid life flashed before her eyes as Kara lifted her arms, covered her face, and let out a bone-chilling shrill. Dragon teeth and claws would be her end. Her death wouldn't come swiftly as she intended to end it, but it would be lengthy and filled with agony just like her life had been one of unending misery. Slashing of claws and rending of teeth tore at her flesh, and Kara experienced one of the worst forms of death, or at least that was what she expected. She waited for a long time for the young cruel dragon to attack, but he never did, so she lowered her arms. He stood there glaring at her with this look of disgust and rage on his young face. Kara had held her breath since he dropped her, and when she finally took one, Kara coughed as sand dust filled her lungs. Blackfire stared at her even more intensely, and then he turned his head to the exit as he heard dragons and people nearing them. Knowing he didn't have much time, Blackfire rushed to her, grabbed her arms, and forced them and her down to the ground. Kara screamed and tried to free herself from his powerful talons, but then she quieted herself, realizing it would do her no good to resist. She was so weak and he was so powerful, dark, and ferocious. Even if someone hurt her in time, All she had before her was the horrible fate she would meet once Bork took her back as a slave. Her fate may be worse with the dark hatchling, but it wouldn't last that long, so she gave in to Blackfire. Lying there as still as a corpse, she stared up at the great murky black brute as he stared at her with his blood-red eyes. She wasn't sure what he was going to do, but he kept glancing at the only entrance to the cliff as if he was in a hurry to complete his task before anyone arrived. Blackfire must be still planning on killing her or eating her. Kara just hoped he would make it quick. If she couldn't escape her dreadful life by cliff, maybe Turk's dragon would release her from this life even if the cost to her was a lot of suffering and torment. Her breathing slowed as she accepted her fate, however horrible and painful it would be. "Please," she managed to whisper, and then she pleaded, "do not prolong my death. I have suffered enough." He eyed her curiously as if deciding what end to give her. The voices of the dragons and people were even closer, but they still had not found them. Now that she was still and didn't resist him, Blackfire leaned down to her and placed his forehead to hers, and they mind-synced. Kara heard a male voice in her own thoughts, and at first, the voice spoke gibberish, but then she heard words that frightened her to her core. "There is no release," he morbidly told her. "And no death. No." She struggled to free herself as she shrieked, "I shall not go back with Bork. Kill me. I want to die. Kill me, you damn creature of the void." Blackfire lifted his head from hers as if she had hit him with a mace. One by one, he released her arms and stepped back from her with his massive dragon legs. He gave her the same rage-filled look he had given her the day of his breaking dawn. Free from him, Kara scampered to the cliff, looked over its edge, and then heard Bork's angry voice above them. It wouldn't be long before someone found them, so if she wanted to be free, she would have to jump to her death. Jump before the dragon stopped her and handed her over to her cruel master. Kara turned to see if Blackfire was upon her yet, and she didn't see teeth or claws or a flurry of wings. He hadn't left the spot he had been standing in. He had only turned to face her, and his rage-filled expression was the same. Blackfire looked as if he was ready to destroy her. She made ready to fling herself over at the slightest movement from the murky black brute, but he never came at her. He must be waiting on Turk, and then the two of them would kill her together or drag her back to Bork. Terror filled her heart from the possibility of dying violently, and from the possibility of dying slowly from the hardship of a slave. She didn't want to die, and she didn't want to live as she once was. She peered at Blackfire, trying to guess his game. If he was waiting on Turk, why hadn't he called out? Everyone was close enough that they could definitely hear him. Kara continued to peer at him, to look into those dreadful blood-red eyes, and then she realized it wasn't anger that she saw on his face, but frustration and disappointment. His determined demeanor, she had seen come at her, slowly changed to one of sadness. The more terrified of him she became, the more depressed he got. Finally, Blackfire had enough and placed one of his wings over his head to shield himself from her fear and disgust. Since the time of his breaking dawn until today, he bore her dislike of him over their misunderstanding. Now he feared nothing would change her feelings toward him. Blackfire couldn't take that fact and wept like a child who had lost his mother. Near the edge, Kara didn't know what to do as she watched the murky black brute, who could easily rip a yak in two, sob like some toddler. She watched him cry bitterly, and the heart that despised him and anything that reminded her of Bork and Turk softened. She didn't know why such a horrendous dragon was crying. She was the one who was doomed to return to a life as a slave. Kara edged closer to the cliff and prepared to jump the moment Bork or Turk appeared. She watched Blackfire and decided that she wasn't imagining it. He was crying like a toddler. Why would he? Was he mocking her? Was he cruelly imitating her earlier heart-wrenching bout with Bold? Kara couldn't figure out why he was crying. She should be the one crying, for Blackfire had tried to hurt her twice now. He must be trying to trick her into moving away from the ledge. It must be the only way he could think of to keep her from flinging herself over. She remembered when Blackfire forced her to the ground. It was as if he desperately wanted to mind sync with her to tell her something important, not to threaten her. It was like he wanted to try to communicate with her instead of just killing her or returning her to Bork. A few moments passed as the commotion of the intense search for them echoed around them. She heard Bork and Turk's angry voices along with Syllabary, Elder Durin, and the concerned voice of Winfrey. So many people and dragons were looking for them that it wouldn't be long before they were found, and if she wanted answers, she would have to question the young dragon before her. Staying at the edge, she asked him, "Why have you not dragged me back to Turk or sounded our position?" I do not understand. Why did you bring me here? You could have easily held me in the tunnel until Turk or Bork arrived. He lowered his wing and looked at her as tears flowed down his murky black face. You are crying, but why? She questioned as she took a few steps forward, drawn to his hurting heart. Kara stopped her progression, fearing it was only an act as she stated. You are the one who seized me and flew me up here. Why are you crying? Why have you not done something to me? He took a step forward, and she retreated and ended up back at the edge. Black Fire lowered his head to her height, signaling he wanted to mind sync again. And then he waited. What do you want from me? What are your intentions? Kara asked him, and then she realized he wasn't like Bold. He couldn't tell her with words yet. If she wanted answers, she would have to hear them from his mind. She glanced over the cliff, turned back to him, and told him, I shall come to you, but if you make any movement toward me, I shall jump. He nodded his understanding, so Kara carefully moved forward, preparing at any moment to dart for the cliff. She cautiously placed her forehead to his, then she heard his thoughts again, and they were more organized and clearer. Please, do not fear me. I have chosen you. Kara, you are the one I want to bond with. Please, do not be afraid of me. Since the day of my breaking dawn, no, even before that, I knew you were the one. You had called out to me over a grassy hill where a tree with a blue trunk and silver leaves stood beside you, and I came. I came and broke free of my egg, but you were not there to greet me. He paused, and then he continued, I was so confused when I first hatched, and I was so hurt that you paid no heed to me once I emerged. I wanted so desperately to come to you, but the rules of the dragon Rite forbade me. I knew I had to find a way, so I was patient. I relied on Turk for guidance and understanding your kind, and he told me if I wanted to make nice with people, I should smile at them. When I smiled at you, you became afraid, so I believed Turk lied to me. No, I know Turk lied to me. He has lied about many things, and I believe he wants to hurt you as much or even more than the wretched pale one. I do not understand. How can you pick me? She questioned him. I am not one of your candidates. I am not one of the ones who selected your egg. Any candidate can bond with any hatchling. Did you not understand when Elder Durin explained it? Black Fire asked her. I did not. I thought once I lost Bold to Tretch that was the end for me. But I guess I also thought no one could lay claim to Bold except for me. Kara stated. There is so much of the dragon Rite I do not understand. I wish Elder Durin had taken the time to explain things once. Turk rushed out to the cliff, interrupting their mind sync, and then Turk turned and yelled behind himself, Father, I found the wench. She opened her eyes, leaving the mind sync, but before Kara did, she felt a slight pinch on her hand. Turk drew his sword as Bork arrived, and then Turk questioned, Shall I kill her, father? No, I have other things planned for her, Bork told his son. And then he ordered him, grab her and hold her down. I brought tethering to bind her. Kara turned to flee for the cliff, but Turk easily seized her as Dragon Elder Durin. Syllabary, Winfrey, and a few of the patrons and candidates came out. Bork threw the tethering cords to his son. Dragon Elder Durin looked at Kara, saw she was no longer just a slave girl, who by an unknown fate happened to join the dragon Rite, and then he informed Bork, You cannot take her. Are you saying you are going to keep her as your slave? Bork questioned him as his son bound her hands. I heard you were going to give her back to me. Now, who is not a man? Her. A dragon of his word. No, you do not understand. I do not want her as a slave, Durin replied. What you had heard is true. What I am saying is Kara is no longer a slave. She is a plebe now. She has passed the fourth act of the dragon Rite. Do not mess with me, dragon. I know the rules of the dragon Rite, Bork told him. Her hatchling selected another, so she must be dropped from the dragon Rite like the rest of the passed-over candidates. He watched as his son made sure the restraints were tight, and then Bork told the large yellow dragon, She is mine to take again. I can assume by your statement that there are two things you have not noticed. Dragon Elder Durin spoke. Blasted. What are you talking about? Bork questioned him. First, you have not noticed the mark of selection on Kara's left hand. A hatchling has bonded with her, Durin said as he motioned to her, and then he looked at Turk and continued. And second, you have not noticed an angry young dragon poised ready to strike your son. Bork looked and saw black fire ready to attack Turk, and then Bork stuttered out, You mean? Yes, Durin answered, very pleased with the outcome. Black fire has bonded with Kara. He has every right to kill your son if he does not release her. and I am very much suggesting that he does so and does so quickly, or you shall have to live on minus an heir." "What is he talking about, father?" Turk asked, as he didn't realize his once hatchling was behind him, watching him very intently. "Listen very carefully, boy," Bork began, and then he instructed him. "I need you to get up from the girl. Move to me, and make no lip about it." Turk saw the expression on his father's face and obeyed him without pause by quickly moving to his side. Turk looked back to Kara and saw that Blackfire was gently cutting off her restraints with a claw. His dragon, for some reason, was helping the wench. "Damn dragons," Bork cursed. "Maybe it was a mistake for our tribe to participate in the dragon rite. Come, Turk, let us go back to the ritual room." "We cannot, father," Turk insisted. "The wench belongs to us. We are her masters." Blackfire growled, and Turk looked at him as the hatchling bared his fangs at him. He instinctively went for his sword. Dragon Elder Durin warned him, "He shall have your head before your blade is fully from your sheath." Turk moved his hand away from the hilt and stepped further away from Blackfire and the girl. "What is this?" Turk demanded. "What has happened? Why is my dragon helping her?" Kara rubbed her wrists once Blackfire released her and saw the dragon mark on top of her left hand. The pinch she had felt earlier must have been when Blackfire only nicked her with his fang. If he had bitten her, she would have known, but he was very gentle with her, and she did not scream. "No," Turk yelled. "He is mine. I worked with the hatchling. He attained Breaking Dawn under my guidance. He is my dragon." The murky black hatchling closed his eyes and concentrated so that he might speak with his mind. Durin nodded, and then he said, "Blackfire has told me through mind syncing that he did not attain Breaking Dawn under your guidance. The day trek when you and your group were pushing him toward the edge, hoping to persuade him to achieve his Breaking Dawn or die." He paused, and then the Dragon Elder added, "Blackfire's words, of course." Durin continued, "Blackfire heard Kara call for him. He heard her wishing that her hatchling would fly to her, and so he did. He flew to her. That is a lie right from the void." Turk shouted, "This cannot be happening." "Bork, it would be wise to take your son now and leave," Durin suggested. "The selection has been made, and it cannot be unmade." Bork looked at the large murky black hatchling, grabbed Turk by his arm, and commanded his son, "Come. We shall get Barman and leave. This is not over." Turk threatened Kara. "Your time shall come, wench, and I shall be there to witness your fall." The two of them stormed off and left the cliff as Kara watched, uncertain that all of this was truly happening. Had she really bonded with a dragon? Had the murky black brute, she had been deathly afraid of, come to her aid when no one else would? Had she really escaped her gruesome fate as a breeder? Chapter 2. Candidates become plebes. Once Bork and his son left the cliff where Kara's life had drastically changed for the better, Dragon Elder Durin turned to the patrons and candidates, and then he commanded them. "Patrons, say your goodbyes to those who are staying once you have reached the ritual room. Then take with you those candidates who did not bond, and return to your homes." Durin ordered those moving on through the dragon rite. "This has been a very trying day. Plebes, you and your dragon shall go to your quarters and rest the remainder of this day. Your midday meal shall be brought to you, and then later your dinner. Do not leave your quarters until you are summoned." The patrons and the candidates, who had gathered on the cliff, turned and left, leaving behind Syllabary, Blackfire, Kara, and Dragon Elder Durin. A dry wind blew over the cliff, kicking up a little dust, and she heard dragons in the distance screaming in the sky above. Kara never imagined the fourth act would have turned out like this. She thought it was all over for her when Bold chose Tretch just to spite her. Kara wondered if Tretch knew Bold only used him and that their bond would most likely be one of deceit and betrayal, as her relationship with the pale hatchling had been in the end. She felt so betrayed by Bold, and she still mourned his loss in her heart. Kara couldn't help it. She had loved him so much, and never once did she even consider he would cast her off. She had been so focused on him hatching and then him attaining his Breaking Dawn. It never even entered her mind he hated her and wanted nothing to do with her. Kara stood before the great yellow dragon, still staring at her hand with the mark of a Dracorider. She peered up at the wise dragon who for a short time had been her master. Dragon Elder Durin would now be a teacher and mentor to her as she and the other plebes went through the next section of the dragon rite. Kara didn't know what to say to him, but she knew she must at least apologize. "I was angry earlier and a bit cruel with my words," she started. "You could have easily returned me to Bork the moment he first gave me to you as a slave, or you could have found some reason for me not to participate in the dragon rite. But you did not. I should thank you for without you, I would not have this opportunity. I do thank you with as much gratitude as I can muster, and I apologize for the words I said to you earlier out of frustration. Please forgive me. There is nothing to forgive, Durant told her. I should not have told you I would return you to Bork. I should have at least found you a good master to give you to if I did not want a slave. I forgot how cruel humans can be. Cruelty is not restricted to humans, Kara told him as she thought of Bold. I do wish that it never existed along with hunger and loneliness. Dragon Elder Durant considered the unusual behavior of the pale hatchling, and then he stated, I guess I have been corrected. Our two species seem to be more similar than I originally thought. Silence fell upon the four of them as they considered the darkness that could take their hearts, and then Black Fire moved to her and motioned with his head that he wanted to mind sync with Kara. She positioned herself so they could, and then he gently bent his neck and placed his forehead to hers. Come, Kara. The Dragon Elder is right about our plebe training beginning tomorrow. We should rest. She looked up into his blood-red eyes with a new profound awareness singing joyously within her heart. For so long, she feared those eyes that seemed to mirror Turk and Bork's vicious intentions for her. Now she saw kindness and affection in them, something Kara never remembered seeing in Bold's when she would look upon his face. Black Fire's concern and thoughtfulness towards her had always been there, but her fear blinded her to the truth of his love. Love, was that what she saw? Was that how he felt about her? Could anyone love her? She yearned for so long for that simple feeling that seemed to be the most unattainable one of all. Was it so hard to love her? Did her appearance and her seeming lack of physical strength draw people away from her? Kara asked, is this real? Have you really selected me or have I died? Have I died, and I am dreaming in the spirit world? I would be happy either way. This is real, he told her with his mind. Shall I bite your hand to prove you are alive? No, I believe you, she quickly replied, not knowing if he would bite her. It is only that I gave up and accepted my fate, but you for some reason selected me. I still do not understand why you picked me. Bold was right. My skills as a warrior shall be limited, and I do not know if I can protect you if we go up against a warlock and his Leviathan. She considered their future, or more like she considered his future, with one who was crippled as badly as she, and Kara questioned him. Is it too late for you to pick another? It is, but I would never pick another, Black Fire non-verbally told her as he lifted his nose and breathed deeply of her scent. He knew it already, but he imprinted it even more deeply within his olfactory senses. The air from his nostrils was hot against her face, but not uncomfortably so. It blew back her hair each time he exhaled. This was another thing Bold never did. Dragons had a very keen sense of smell and was one of the things they could use to track down prey or their rider. There were so many things about Bold she never caught on to, but in her own defense, she didn't know much about dragons when she first came to Firedrake. Our paths are bound to the same destiny, Black Fire told her with even more affection. You shall see. We might not know it now, but there is a reason we are to be together. He lifted his nose and stroked the side of her cheek with it. His nose was soft like that of a horse, and she unconsciously raised her hands, letting go of doubt, and hugged him. Happiness couldn't describe how she felt at that moment, but she did realize that he loved her with all his being. She sensed it in the tender aura around them as they mind-synced. Another thing that was different when she and Bold mind-synced. The pale hatchling's sinister aura seemed to make her sick and recoil from him. Come, Kara, Black Fire urged her, knowing she thought of Bold, the one who had been his rival since their hatching. He would try to make her forget about the one who cast her off, the one she thought was meant for her. The one who with brutal words and sadistic actions made her experience a level of abandonment and desolation she never experienced even with her parents. If Kara had only known it was him and not Bold who was with her on the grassy hill within her dream, then the bitterness her heart experienced may be less, or it may have never even existed. It was up to him to dispel the breach of commitment she suffered and replace it with feelings of loyalty and total trust. He would start out with dwarf steps and try to win her completely over with patience and love. So Black Fire projected, we should rest. I can tell you are very exhausted from your ordeal, and I am somewhat tired. Let us put away everything that has happened today and start anew together. Black Fire got a sense that she trusted him at least a little since he marked her, but he didn't know the depth of her trust. So he added, please believe me when I say I am not Bold, and I shall be by your side always. So do not hide part of your heart from me as you are doing now. I know I cannot expect this right away, but with time, you shall see that I am sincere about our bonding. I am yours, and you are mine. I am exhausted, she stated, not wanting to dwell on betrayal or trust. Kara wanted to go hide her eyes in her bedroll or maybe Winfrey's shoulder. She should turn to her new hatchling in her time of need, but then trust and betrayal popped up in her mind again, so Kara moved them away from the subject by saying, "Though, I might need to request different quarters if you are to be my dragon. I do not think you shall fit in mine. It is very tiny just like." She let the name of her once beloved to dwell only in her mind. Kara decided then and there that she would never mention Bold again in comparing him to Blackfire. She would only speak his name when necessary. Blackfire perceived the sadness within her when she had unknowingly first made contact with him while he was within his egg in the quickening chamber. He perceived that same sadness within her now along with confusion and uncertainty, and it made him feel slightly put aside. There was doubt within her as there had been doubt in the statement, "If you are to be my dragon." Blackfire couldn't expect her to rely on him right away even though he wished it with all his being. He needed to approach their relationship with understanding and perseverance. "I believe my quarters shall do for our needs," Blackfire replied, allowing the conversation to stray from the one he wanted to talk about. "Though, if I can fit in yours, maybe tonight we should stay in your quarters. Kara, I do not want you running into Turk ever again." She didn't like the idea of returning to the place which contained so many memories of Bold and herself, but Kara decided it would be for the best. Memories could only inflict emotional pain and scars. A flesh and blood person like Turk could inflict physical ones, and she didn't want Blackfire to get into any trouble should he hurt the young master. Young master no more. She moved back her head, ending their mind sync. Bold and Tretch could be in her quarters. The room had also belonged to the pale hatchling. Kara hoped Tretch at least had enough sense not to go there as she and Blackfire headed for the tunnel. She placed a hand on her dragon's shoulder as they walked side by side. As the two of them left, Syllabary moved to the great yellow dragon's side, and then he spoke, "Something is bothering me." "What is that?" Dragon Elder Durin questioned the scribe. Syllabary stated, Kara never touched Blackfire's egg and established the first bond, so for him to have chosen her, their connection must be very strong. "I believe you are right," Durin replied. "It is not uncommon for a dragon to choose one that was not touching his egg when they hatched, but it is very rare. This dragon Rite. Many odd things have occurred during it so far." "Odd indeed," Syllabary spoke. "First, there was the laying of the very large egg and the very small one. A girl participating in Firedrake's ritual. Blackfire spitting fire that was not of magic, and him attaining breaking dawn a few days after hatching. And then there was Bold talking as well as any human during the fourth act and not selecting the only one who bonded with him as an egg. And I have never seen a dragon act as he did. Such hatred and cruelty oozed from Bold as if he were consumed by them. He shall have to be watched," Durin said. "You might consider pulling him from the dragon Rite," Syllabary suggested. "I shall consider it, but for now, he and Tretch shall stay." "Expositus," Syllabary shouted, and then his enchanted scroll activated and unrolled in front of him, and he began writing. He paused from his writing and said, "Since we are talking about odd occurrences, do not forget the incident with Kara and Turk." Dragon Elder Durin inquired, "Do you mean the time Turk accused her of attacking him?" "I do," Syllabary answered, and then he stated, "No ordinary fire burned him that day. Kara claimed it came from a torch, but I wonder if a dragon was nearby and actually had a claw in it." "Are you suggesting Bold came to Kara's aid?" Elder Durin questioned. "I am not suggesting that, exactly, but I do believe magic was involved," Syllabary said, and then he added, "Whether it was Espel or regular magic, I do not know. If it was not from a dragon, then where did the intense flame come from? Maybe we should look into those who were also involved with Kara or Turk. Her attendant's name is Winfrey, but I do not know much about her, and there is also Tretch. I doubt the fire came from Tretch. Humans are not magic wielders. They can use enchanted items, but they cannot cast. Winfrey, on the other hand, I also do not know much about her. She came up from Ryujin, the south nest of the dragons. She came a fortnight before the dragon Rite and brought no scroll of recommendation, but that is not uncommon this day and age. No one doubted her that she worked at Ryujin. I shall send word to Ryujin and inquire about Winfrey." Syllabary paused from his writing, and then he stated, "We have much to investigate. I do wonder if these things we have witnessed have anything to do with the appearance of the Stygian Legion," Durin said. "If you remember, a Leviathan was supposed to have been spotted near our border. They did not cross, and the eyewitness account reported a large blurry winged creature larger than a dragon flying in the sky. No one has seen it since, but still. Even knowing it could be true. What do you mean? Syllabary asked. Why would these things here at Firedrake have you also concerned about the Stygian Legion? My friend, I believe these things have been more than odd occurrences, but signs, or should I say omens. Durin answered. Omens? Omens of what? That a new age is upon us, Durin answered, and then he headed toward the tunnel, stomping across the sand. An age where peace and tranquility are but distant memories. I do not like the sound of that, Syllabary stated, and then he finished writing the last word and commanded, Clausus. The convey scroll rolled itself up and came to rest in his hand. He placed it in his satchel along with the blazing quill, and then he followed the dragon elder and also left the cliff. I think I shall send another scribe in search of a queen for this nest, Syllabary stated, and then he spoke. If the gloom and doom you predicted comes true, I should be here to record it. Gloom and doom, Durin uttered as he glanced at the scribe. I would prefer to see you write a happy ending. I can only write what I witness or hear, Syllabary told him. And on that note, can you tell me more about past dragon rites? You sound as though omens have appeared before. Perhaps I shall tell you tomorrow, Durin said, and then he added, I am very tired. This old dragon has seen many dragon rites, and this one has been very trying on me. Is that because you were given a girl slave to do with as you please and you please to give her back? Partly, Durin answered. I wonder if I am not as intuitive as I used to be. I also did not foresee the actions of Bold. No one foresaw his actions, Syllabary said. I wonder what he still has in store for us. More importantly, Durin interrupted. What more does Bold have in store for Kara? Chapter 3. A new menace from the old. Nearly a fortnight earlier. 10 days' journey by horse from the Vander Braze Kingdom's border. 2 of the Royal Draco army flew on a mission. They flew through the skies already some distance from the Athenia palace they were stationed near, and they rode with their shield in hand as all Dracomen and Dracowomen were trained to fly. Corman was the 4th lieutenant of the Royal Draco Riders, which was a unit within the Royal Draco army, and he flew upon Bladed Wing, who had the same rank as he. Along on their mission flew Kylo on his dragon Ice Touch. They traveled for the Forgotten Lands to investigate a slaughter a traveling gems peddler came upon. The peddler sent word to the palace that he happened upon the remains of 2 Droks and what appeared to be an entire flock of sheep. The shepherd who the peddler had spoken to the day before was nowhere in sight, so the palace sent them out to investigate. They feared it was one of their royal shepherds. They started their flight when the sun first appeared on the horizon, and it was nearly at its halfway point. The Dracomen and their dragons would fly through the night trek and arrive at the spot sometime before tomorrow's high sun. Clouds cluttered the warm day as the dragons flew just below them. I heard one of your wife's Droks had a huge litter the other day. I heard there were 24 pups, and if that is true, the litter broke the record by 6. Kylo spoke. He along with the lieutenant wore the brown armored leather pants, vest, and boots of a Draco rider along with a white long-sleeve shirt. Those in the army bore 2 crests on the back of their vest and 1 on each side of the front of their vest. On the back of their vest, the large crest in the center was the coat of swords, and it was the crest of the unit they belonged to in the army. Both men bore the coat of swords of the Royal Draco Riders, and the crest was of a purple dragon with wings spread. The smaller crest above it was the coat of claws and was usually the crest of the birth nest of the dragon. Ice Touch and Bladed Wing were both from Yon, the west nests of the dragons, so their Dracomen bore the coat of claws of a sitting dragon with its wings tucked and 1 claw raised. It is true, Corman stated. I believe she shall receive the Royal Athenia Award for top breeder this year. The Royal Vanguard Infantry's Spearmen Division exclusively uses her kennel. They shall be very pleased to hear how many pups they shall be receiving to train this year. Kylo patted Ice Touch's white hide, which was accented by blue as he spoke. I believe I prefer a dragon to a Drok. They are so much larger than those slobbering mounds of meat that they can prevail over any creature in our lands. There is no way. I cannot say the same thing for you, his pair, Ice Touch, interrupted him. I might prefer a slobbering Drok to you, especially if you keep talking about me like some unthinking creature under your arse instead of your partner. One moment. Kylo shouted. That is not fair. Which part? Corman's pair, Bladed Wing, a green dragon with large gold spots, questioned him. The slobbering part, Kylo declared to the other dragon near them. I by no means slobber. Ice Touch told his pair, "You are still as thick as a drock." "That is not fair either," Kylo insisted. "Either is having you as a partner," Bladed Wing told him. Poor Man ordered them, "I think that is enough. Let us focus on flying instead, inferring only true things about Kylo." "Thank you, Lieutenant. Wait one moment. I do not think that was fair either. You are our leader, so you are supposed to lead by example." "And here I thought I was," Man spoke, and then he chuckled. The two dragons joined in on his laughter when a dark blur flew just above them through the clouds. The menacing shadow, about 5 times the size of a dragon, was so massive that its wake rocked the dragons. The menacing shadow quickly came by a second time and struck Ice Touch's left wing, nearly slicing the dragon open, and the attack sent him and Kylo hurling toward the ground. Poor Man drew his spear from the sheath on his back as he glanced at the other two as they fell in their death spiral. He turned his attention to the sky above them. "Did you see where it went or what it was?" Poor Man inquired. "I did not," Bladed Wing replied. "It went back into the clouds, and I have lost sight of it. Whatever attacked them is huge. What of the other two?" Poor Man glanced down at Kylo and his dragon just as Ice Touch maneuvered himself and stopped his free fall. He glided with difficulty some distance below them. "They pulled out," Poor Man replied. "We should fly to them and cover them until we know who our enemy is." Bladed Wing glided down as he and Corman were still wary of their unknown enemy. When they reached their comrades, they saw a large claw mark across Ice Touch's side, and he was bleeding profusely from the wounds. Seeing the size of the claw marks, Corman knew right away what had attacked them. "We need to get out of here," Corman told them. "Why is that?" Kylo inquired, worried about his pair. "Only one thing that flies has claw marks that size," Corman started. "Most likely a Leviathan and a Warlock have crossed the border and entered the Athenia territory. If it is alone, we are no match for it. If it has brought friends, we are all dead, not that we still shall not die." He kept his eyes on the sky around them as he questioned, "Ice Touch, can you fly a while longer? I know you are badly injured, but if you can, we should head for the abandoned fort at Malone." The fort was abandoned, for it was hard for the army to use dragons within the structure. "It shall be a tight squeeze getting in, but if we can get inside, the Leviathan shall have great difficulty following us, and we shall make our stand there." "I believe I can," Ice Touch grunted his reply. Poor Man asked his own dragon, "Are you close enough to any other riders to send a message by mind sync?" Bladed Wing answered, "I am. Relay that we are under attack by what we believe is a Leviathan and a Warlock. We have not confirmed the presence of a Warlock as of yet, but the beast is definitely here. Tell them we are requesting immediate support from any dragon in the area, and that they are to pass this information on to the Royal Draco army." "I sense that you are greatly disturbed by this new enemy," Bladed Wing stated after he sent the message. "I am. Back during the war, I heard it took at least 10 dragons to take down one Leviathan. We are greatly outmatched, and I fear that we may not survive this day." They allowed Ice Touch and Kylo to fly ahead of them and some distance below them as they watched the sky for another attack. They didn't have to wait too long. The huge Leviathan dove out of the clouds as if it were a great whale returning to the ocean it had leapt out of. A Warlock, who wore dark armor, rode upon its neck and directed the great beast toward the dragon they had yet to mark. Corman held tightly to his shield and spear as Bladed Wing used his magic to fight their enemy. His magic talent lay within his wings. His wings glowed, and then he flung wind blades that resembled boomerangs hurling through the air from them. The magical blades didn't directly hit as their enemy moved, but they did slice at the Leviathan. The Leviathan returned their attack with one of his own and shot a sonic blast from its mouth that nearly hit them. The sonic blast did rock Corman and Bladed Wing as if they floated on the ocean. Kylo and Ice Touch turned and started to fly to their aid, but Corman yelled to them, "Continue to head for the fort at Malone. Do not engage the Leviathan. Ice Touch is already severely wounded and cannot sustain another attack. The two of you shall barely make it to the fort as it is. Now go, that is an order." Ice Touch and Kylo reluctantly obeyed and turned, heading away from them. Corman and Bladed Wing needed to gain them enough time to flee. Their enemy was bigger, but Leviathan's speed in flight was nearly on par with the dragon's. The Warlock cast a lightning spell with the staff he held and hurled it at Bladed Wing. The dragon maneuvered himself along with his Dracomin so that the lightning spell hit the Dracomin's shield. The shield was made of Vim crystals, and Corman forced the magic back at the Warlock, but his black beast evaded the attack and the spell struck the clouds above. The Warlock's lightning crackled through the clouds and was so bright it was visible in the day. The Leviathan dove for Corman and Bladed Wing to tear them apart with its humongous talons that were nearly the size of the dragon's body. Bladed Wing called upon his wind blades, and this time, the magical weapons made a direct strike at the Leviathan's chest. The great beast screamed in pain, but it didn't divert from its path and continued to charge at them. Bladed Wing attacked again with his wind blades and struck the Leviathan for a second time, but that still didn't deter it from its downward charge. Bladed Wing turned and started to flee across the horizon from the huge shadow rapidly moving down upon them like a bird of prey on a rabbit. Its great talons were nearly upon them when a blast of ice shot past him and struck the Leviathan's talons. Kylo and Ice Touch disobeyed orders, returned, and engaged their enemy. Ice Touch formed another sphere of energy with his front talons and shot out another attack of ice, hitting the legs of the Leviathan. The added weight on its talons and the sharp coldness searing its flesh deterred their enemy, and caused the Leviathan to flap its wings in place. The Leviathan couldn't move its talons or the lower part of its legs as a block of ice embedded them in an icy grave. Ice Touch prepared to attack again, but before he could, the Warlock lifted his staff and called upon his own magic. The Leviathan seemed to become on fire as blazing flames consumed its entire body, and it screamed again in pain, but this time, the attack came from its own rider. The flames didn't hurt the caster. The intense flames melted the ice away, then the Leviathan's talons and legs were free again, and the Warlock dispelled the inferno. Smoke rose from the burnt hide of the Leviathan as it started its attack again, but its fury was aimed against the wounded dragon. The great beast was enraged not only at them but the one on its neck that caused it so much pain. Seeing their comrades in trouble, Corman commanded Bladed Wing, "Go for its head and then wait until we are nearly upon it before you strike with your wind blades." The Leviathan dove for Ice Touch, and the wounded dragon turned and flew away as Bladed Wing aimed for the Leviathan's head. Kylo called upon his dragon's magic and channeled it through his spear, which was also embedded with Vim crystals, and then he shot several ice javelins from his spear as the Leviathan neared them. The ice javelins struck but did little to deter the giant beast. Bladed Wing drew close enough so he could hurl several wind blades at their enemy, but by then, the Leviathan had already struck Ice Touch and nearly tore off his already wounded wing. Ice Touch and Kylo plummeted for the earth as Corman and Bladed Wing attacked again. The Leviathan turned on the lone dragon and sunk his teeth into his back leg, and Bladed Wing screamed for the pain. Corman shot several wind javelins at the Leviathan, and then he turned his aim for the Warlock. The Warlock smiled as the projectiles of air hurled towards them, and then he simply raised a magical energy sphere shield and blocked them. The Leviathan attacked again with its mouth and grabbed hold of Bladed Wing's head, chomping down on him. Their enemy then flung Corman and the battered dragon toward the earth, and Bladed Wing limply fell with his rider staring up at their enemy, knowing that he could do nothing to save his life. The Warlock and the Leviathan circled the area until the two dragons struck the ground, and then the Warlock, after an amusing fight with the great Dracoman and their dragons, directed the Leviathan to fly off towards their destination. Chapter 4. The start of a new day. The present. Back at Firedrake. The sun rose without Kara as she slept wearily into mid-morning. She dreamed again that night of the grassy hill and the silvery blue oak, but this time, she knew who flew above her in the sky and who reached out to her with his talon. And later in the dream, she knew whose back she rode upon. The knowledge created harmony between the two that they lacked when he marked her. Kara couldn't see herself without Blackfire, and he couldn't see himself without her. When Winfrey finally woke Kara, she found that she wasn't sleeping on her bedroll, but she had curled up on one of Blackfire's large wings and he had covered her with his other. Kara thought it would be extremely hot sleeping with a dragon on his sand bed, so she never attempted it with Bold. The temperature was just right for her, but she couldn't see how that could be. Kara had felt the sand long ago, and it was like desert sand that the sun had beat down on all day. She wondered if Blackfire had regulated his body temperature between his wings somehow so it was more to her liking than his. "I almost called for the guards," Winfrey told her as she bent down to the sleeping girl. "I thought you had gone missing when I first came in. I thought something had happened to you, for I called and called but you never answered." Kara saw how worried she made her attendant, and she sleepily spoke. "I am sorry. I did not know I had left my bed, and I must have been so tired I did not hear you." "It is all right," Winfrey told her as she put a hand to her chest to fight off the attack of the heart the girl nearly gave her. "It is not unusual for a young bonded pair to sleep like this. It is just that he is so big it appeared he slept alone." You left your bedroll during our connection dream last night. Blackfire spoke to Kara with his mind, but he hadn't yet mind sync with her the way she was used to. She rolled over and faced him as she was still curled up in his wing, and then Kara said, I can hear you. I can hear you even though we are not mind sync. You finally allowed me into your heart last night as we rode the winds. We are a bonded pair. We do not need to touch to mind sync, and soon we shall be able to communicate great distances with the mind sync. Kara reached up and touched his soft nose, and Blackfire closed his eyes and nuzzled her hand. The new day came and filled her with joy as he had promised her. Difficulty and hardship lay before them, but they had each other to rely on. She would no longer be alone in this world. She had someone with her who would be like a brother to her. Blackfire would be a true brother to her, not like the ones related to her by blood who cared nothing for her. He would be one who bonded to her by something deeper than a mere chance of birth. You need to rise, Winfrey told her as she walked over to the table and removed last night's dirty dishes. Eat something. I shall bring something back for him, and then once the two of you finish, I shall escort you to the training grounds. Grumbling that she must move from his soft and comfortable wings, Kara slowly rose and went over to the water basin and splashed water on her face. She returned to her morning routine, and then she rubbed Blackfire down with oil that she neglected to do the night before. Kara finished getting ready and ate some breakfast as Blackfire ate a raw piece of meat Winfrey brought for him. They finished and Winfrey led them to the training grounds. Later that day, Trek, a man clad in the leather armor pants, vest, and boots of the Royal Draco Army stepped forward and was about to introduce himself to the children and hatchlings gathered there. The man had shoulder-length brown hair, a scar across his right cheek, and the small coat of claws of Agamid. The crest was of a green dragon with its wings spread wide, and it adorned the top back of his vest along with the front right side of this vest near his heart. He was a veteran of the army and served as a Royal Draco Skyman. They were an elite unit of highly trained warriors. He bore on the back of his vest and in its center a large coat of swords of a red dragon in flight that looked like a dagger, and the crest was also on the left side of the front of his vest. He still wore the red long-sleeve shirt of his unit as a testimony of his valor and bravery in service. If trouble brewed on the horizon, the Royal Draco Skymen were the first to be sent in. Many tried to enter their ranks, but few made it through the rigorous training and either dropped out or were injured so badly they were forced out or they died. The man peered down at those who gathered before him as he put his hands behind his back and clasped them together. He was a harsh teacher, but a good one. Instead of retiring from the army when it came time, he and his dragon decided to return to his dragon's nest Agamid and train the next generation of Draco Riders. Firedrake became short on teachers, so he journeyed there after teaching a few years at Agamid. A woman stood beside him, looking as menacing as he, and she was also clad in the same armor and had the same coat of claws as he. Her hair was long and red and pulled back in a long braid, and her vest bore the coat of swords of the Royal Vanguard Infantry's Spearman Division. The crest was of a walking blue dragon with a mounted Draco Rider and a Drac walking beside them. Her long-sleeve shirt was blue. 2 large tables were set up with different types of items on them and were positioned to the left of the instructors. Both of the human instructors made Kara extremely nervous, for here she stood before them merely as a once slave, and a plebe with little knowledge of dragons, dragon rites, or even what plebes train for once they start their schooling. The Dracomen and the Dracowomen's large dragons waited behind them and looked over the small crowd of plebes. It was hard for Kara to keep eye contact with the instructors, whether they were man, woman, or dragon. Slaves kept their gaze to the ground, and it was a hard lesson to break. It had been driven into her repeatedly by a slap or a harsh word. The dragon instructors didn't bear such an intimidating atmosphere around them. It made Kara feel a little better, seeing that a woman was there and that she would be one of the ones to teach her. Dragon Elder Durin didn't lie. There were Dracowomen, and this one had been in the Royal Draco Army. It eased her spirit to know she wouldn't be the only female there. She took comfort in knowing there was much that the Dracowomen could teach her. The dragon instructors weren't as large as Dragon Elder Durin, but they were 5 times the size of most of the hatchlings gathered except for Blackfire and Bold. Blackfire was 1/3 of the size of the dragon instructors, and Bold was about 1/7 of their size. There were 4 other men there. They were Venetian red scribes, donning scarlet robes embroidered with gold, and they recorded everything they witnessed. Kara didn't recognize any of the scribes. She thought Syllabary would be there among them, but he was nowhere in sight. The man in leather motioned to himself and then to the Dracowoman as he introduced them. I am Instructor Dracowoman Gale, and this is Instructor Dracowoman Air. We shall be teaching you the art of combat with melee weapons. You shall be given wooden practice weapons to begin your plebe training. For you plebes who brought your own steel weapons, starting tomorrow you shall leave them in your quarters and may only carry them if you leave Firedrake. You are all plebes and plebes only have wooden weapons. A few of the boys groaned over the rule and muttered their disdain of it under their breaths. The group stood on Bio, and it was a plateau located some distance north of the main structure of Firedrake. Plebes from Firedrake, the northeast nests of the dragons, and those from the nearby Agamid, the east nests of the dragons, were gathered to begin their training. Agamid had a large amount of eggs this year and sent their overflow to Firedrake to be trained since the smaller nest had fewer pairs than normal. There were 12 groups in all. 5 were from Firedrake and 7 were from Agamid. Each group of plebes had their attendant with them. Instructor Dracowoman Air stepped forward, and she stated, "Dragons have few vulnerable spots, and as their riders, you shall learn to protect these weak areas. There are 5 spots on the head and neck that you must protect while you are in combat. Over the next few days, you shall learn those spots and how best to protect them, and while the riders are training here, another instructor shall teach your dragon magic." One of the boys raised his hand. "What is it?" Air questioned. The boy cleared his throat and asked, "When do we learn to fly on our dragons? Your dragons are still young and need to mature a little more, so you shall not learn flight until the second part of your plebe training." Air looked over the boy, and then she questioned him, "What is your name?" "I am Plebe Aaron." He motioned to his copper hatchling as he completed his introduction. "My dragon is Plebe Dirk. Understand this, Plebe Aaron, that there is a time for questions and a time to be silent." Air scolded him. "Interrupting your instructor is not that time. Is that understood?" "Yes, Instructor Dracowoman Air." "Good, now you shall be issued your plebe uniforms and your plebe weapons. I shall also have you begin drills to strengthen your body for use of these weapons. Come forward as you are called," Air told them, and then she stepped back to a table piled with weapons. Gale went and stood next to a table piled with uniforms and unrolled a parchment, and then he said, "Cyan of Sky." Cyan stepped forward along with his blue dragon hatchling. He still wore his light brown leather vest and pants of the Northern Grass Plains tribe. The leather band with the silver grass hawk kept back his long light brown hair. Gale handed him his uniform, and Air handed him his weapons. Kara had mixed feelings about Cyan. He was Turk's friend, but she had very little dealings with him. She knew that they would be training together and tried to keep an open mind. If Turk wasn't there, maybe Cyan would treat her and her dragon fairly. "Kara of Blackfire," Gale called out. "It is actually Kara AabiLynn of Blackfire." She corrected him, then covered her mouth after she blurted it, and feared he would chastise her. It was so unlike her to care if her proper name had been used or not. "I stand corrected," Gale spoke, and then he stated, "You must be of the Northern Grass Plains tribe." She nodded. Gale called out again, "Kara AabiLynn of Blackfire." "Here," she replied and proudly limped forward as Blackfire followed. Gale watched as the odd set of plebes went forward, and he couldn't help but see the young dragon that was more than twice the size of most of the other hatchlings. He was almost so distracted by the hatchling's enormousness that Gale almost didn't notice her limping. Kara arrived at the table, and Gale moved to them and patted the murky black hatchling's chest. "You are a big one," Gale spoke. "I heard this dragon nest had a mammoth-sized hatchling, and to think you bonded with the small child." "You cannot judge steel by its shine," Air said as she walked up to them from around the table. "Or have you forgotten when you were a plebe?" "No, I have not," Gale answered the other instructor. Kara asked, "What does she mean?" Air answered, "The man you see before you is known as the Run of Agamid." "That was a dragon's lifetime ago," Gale insisted, and then he added with a snarl, "No one calls me that anymore." Air leaned to him and whispered, "Except maybe me." Gale whispered back, "I never recall you calling me that in bed." "On the contrary, you have said." Air put 2 fingers to his lips as she whispered to him, "Perhaps talking of this in front of the children is not appropriate." Gale glanced at Kara, who had no idea what they were hinting at, and then he told Air, "You are right. We shall finish discussing this later tonight." He stepped back to his position, grabbed a pile of clothes, cleared his throat, and said, "Here is your plebe uniform. It is the smallest size we have, but it still may be a bit big on you." Kara looked over the hard and tan leather plebe armor that consisted of a helmet, breastplate, shin guards, and forearm guards. She was also given leather pants and a vest with Firedrake's coat of claws proudly displayed on the back and on the front. The uniform was glorious compared to the sackcloth tunic she wore, which had marked her as slave. The first thing she would do once she finished training today was to burn her wretched tunic. Kara never wanted to see anything that reminded her of her old life with the Northern Grass Plains tribe. They wouldn't be the only memories she needed to rid herself of. She couldn't help but glance around the crowd of plebes she had mostly ignored until now, searching for the pale hatchling. But then she felt Blackfire's presence near her mind and knew he would be hurt if she allowed herself to think about the dragon who was once almost hers. No, Kara was kidding herself back then. Bold was never almost hers. Winfrey took the uniform from Kara, and then she told the girl, "I shall place these in your room, and you can change into them later." "Thank you," Kara replied, though she wished to wear her new clothes now. She would have to be patient, so she walked to the next table. Winfrey headed off along with the other attendants as they took the uniforms from their human plebes one by one, and then they headed for the plebes' quarters. The attendants would return once they prepared their plebes' midday meals. Air grabbed a disc with a handle in its center and a long shaft of wood. Both of the training weapons were made from the canyon oak, a tree native to the area. Air told Kara, "These are your primary weapons, so learn to use the shield and spear. These are smaller than the actual weapons, and since they are made of wood, they are much lighter, but once you have grown accustomed to their weight, you shall be upgraded to the next level of training weapons, which are made of metal. You shall not receive your actual Draco weapons until you have passed your plebe training." She looked Kara over and realized why she had been limping. It wasn't because she had been injured during the dragon rite. No, to Air's shock she saw Kara's left leg was shorter than the other and that her left arm was stunted. "I shall learn to use them, Instructor Dracoum Air," Kara promised after the woman she admired went silent. She waited for a reply from Air, but for some reason, she only stared at her and made Kara uncomfortable. Blackfire told her in her thoughts, "It is time we move on and allow the other plebes to receive their training weapons." Kara glanced at her pair, nodded to him, and looked back to Air, who was still dumbstruck, and then Kara walked off along with Blackfire. She glanced back at the instructors when she was about halfway back to the crowd. Air still peered at her with her peculiar, almost disappointed expression on her face. "Do not worry about the Dracowoman," Blackfire told her. "It shall take some people time to grow accustomed to your unique physical form." She spoke to him through the mind sync and questioned him, "Did it take you time to become accustomed to it?" "No," Blackfire replied. "For me, there was nothing to become accustomed to. You are as I have always known you." He reached over with his head and gently shoved her so that she sidestepped a few strides, and then he projected, "Never let people who perceive you ever change how you perceive yourself. Promise me this. Together we can overcome any obstacle thrown at us. The others shall have doubts, so we must be strong in our convictions." "I shall try," Kara told him, and then she added, "But I do not know if I can promise. It is hard to break away from others' impressions." Back at the tables, Hale continued calling plebes up as Air moved over to him, and she discreetly questioned him, "Did you notice her deformed arm? Shall she be able to raise a shield with it?" "Only time shall tell," he replied, and then he asked, "Was it not you who said we should not judge steel by its shine? If that is true, we cannot judge a plebe by what we think they shall do, but by what they actually do." Kara bonded with Blackfire and helped a hatchling attain Breaking Dawn, so she is entitled to the next phase of the dragon rite. She already has to work 3 times as hard as the boys because they have more upper body strength, and most of them have already had some training with weapons, Air stated. And then she questioned, "How is she to overcome this infirmity?" "I cannot see how. We shall have to see how she does," Gale interrupted her as he handed out the next uniform. "We have the 5th act to see if the plebes can work together with their hatchlings and are capable of protecting them. It would be a shame if she was not able to complete this act. Blackfire looks like he would make an excellent warrior. I heard he spit fire the day he hatched. There must be great magic within him, and he shall be a brute when he is fully grown." Gale called the next group, Tretch of Bold. Tretch stepped forward along with the pale hatchling and those who had witnessed the tragedy play out on the middle ground within Firedrake's quickening chamber quieted. They waited to see if anything would come of it now that the 2 pairs were in the same area again. Bold spoke to Tretch in a hushed tone, "It seems we have gained a reputation among the plebes of Firedrake. Our infamy shall spread, and the plebes of Agamid shall also know about us. Are you sure it was a good idea to bond with me?" Tretch replied, "I would not change anything. We were meant for each other." Our goals are the same. Bold narrowed his eyes as he looked over at the naive boy walking beside him. Bold would see as time went on if their goals remained the same. Kara was someone Bold cared for. He disliked Tretch, so Bold didn't see their partnership ending any better than the one he already cast off. From her spot in the crowd, Kara watched the two and couldn't help but feel sick. So sick she thought she would faint. It was just yesterday that all the hope she had in the world had been placed on the pale hatchling who betrayed her with his malice and hatred. She hoped to put all those feelings behind her, but she doubted even time could wipe them from existence. Just when she thought her knees would buckle, Blackfire leaned his large head down to her and gently rubbed it against her side. His great affection for her strengthened her, and Kara's light-headedness went away. The bond between them flourished as if the half-day they spent together had been months. "Do not worry about them," Blackfire nonverbally told her as he snorted, and a spark of black flame shot from his nostrils. "If they try to hurt you again, I shall eat them." She felt his hot breath hit against the side of her arm as she said, "Thank you for your concern, but I would prefer that you not eat anyone. I am not saying you cannot bite them a couple of times or burn them slightly, just do not kill." "It is agreed. I shall bite them if they try to hurt you again, so please, Kara, do not be sad." "I shall try, but a heart feels what it wants to feel," she told him as she rubbed the top of his bony head. "I cannot help but feel betrayed by the two of them. I do not know what to tell you to make you stop hurting. You should know you are not alone. I shall always be with you." "Thank you," Kara spoke as she turned and faced him. "My heart is a little better already." She wrapped her arms around his head, placed her cheek to his forehead, and hugged him as she whispered, "I shall simply try not to think of them and focus on us. We have much to overcome. Or should I say, I have much to overcome before I can be a proper Draco woman. We is the correct term," he projected. "I shall help you any way I can." Chapter 5. Hold your shield, hold your spot. Gale and Air finished handing out the uniforms and weapons to the human plebes. All of the attendants had left, and one of them was already on their way back, walking up the steep trail to Bio. The attendant went and stood by Cyan and Sky. He had a satchel with him that contained the plebes' midday meal. "Look here," Air shouted to get the attention of all the plebes. "You of the tribe of men shall learn the basic moves of your weapons, and you shall practice them all day. Tomorrow, you shall put them to use, so learn them well." Air picked up her Dracospear that had been leaning against the table and her Dracoshield that had been lying on the table. The shield and spear were made of Agon steel, and Vim crystals were embedded in both of them. Blacksmiths of the Agon dragons created the steel with their own fiery breath. When King Vis first invaded the land of Athenia, his Stygian legion pillaged the land of Agon along the way to supply their army. The Stygian legion nearly wiped out the cave dwarves who had a symbiotic relationship with the Agon dragons. Cave dwarves mined for gold and gems, and the Agon dragons used their abandoned mines for lairs and in return, guarded their treasure. Blacksmiths of the Agon dragons offered their services to the Athenia dragons, and to this day, they were the only blacksmiths to create Draco weapons. "You shall hold your weapons as such," Air instructed them as she held the heavy shield in front of herself. It was oval, 4 sphinx palm widths at its breadth, 6 sphinx palm widths at its height, and had a crescent-shaped indentation halfway up on each breadth side. The spear was all steel and had no separate head, for it was one solid piece. The shaft itself had been honed into a 4-sided point. Air thrust the spear back and forth through the shield's crescent indentions as she told them, "Your goal is to be able to hold the shield in place while you thrust your spear 2,000 times. I would like you to strengthen your other arm, so I would like you to switch sides and complete the same number of thrusts once you have finished with your dominant hand. Your muscles shall burn, but this pain shall pay off in the end. Plebes from the tribe of men, you shall conduct this exercise as the plebe hatchlings go to begin their magic training. Now pick up your weapons and begin." The boys and Kara lifted their weapons as the instructor had shown them, and they began thrusting with their spears as they counted to themselves. "Hatchlings, come with me," Gale said, and the young dragons followed. "I shall take you to your instructors." Gale's cream-colored dragon, Chinook, went with him, and Air's green speckled copper dragon, Zephyr, stayed with her. The sun rose behind the plebes as Air observed them. She instructed a few to change their stance and the way they were holding their shield or spear. Air noticed Kara struggling and approached her. 37. 38. Kara counted softly. 39. Kara lowered the shield as her left arm shook with the weight of it, and she could no longer hold it up. She had become accustomed to using her right as if it were the only arm she had. But when Kara noticed the instructor eyeing her, she raised her shield and continued counting. 40. 40. 1. She couldn't keep it up and lowered the shield again. Kara set it on the ground along with the spear and rubbed her left arm, thinking if she did this she would soon be able to continue again. Air moved to her and ordered her, pick them up. Kara quickly did as the Dracowoman angrily hovered over her. Continue, Air ordered. Struggling to keep the wooden shield up, Kara thrust the spear as she counted. 40. 2. 40. 3. Kara lowered it again and felt the disappointment burn from the instructor's grim expression like the rays of the sun heating up her back. Air shouted, do not stop. Continue. I cannot. It is too heavy, Kara said as sweat dripped down her face. I have to rest just a little. I said continue. Air snapped. Kara tried raising the shield, but she didn't have the strength to do so. Air commanded, drop your weapons. As if she had done some great wrong, Kara timidly laid them on the ground. Give me your left hand. Kara placed her hand in the Dracowoman's outstretched one, then Air pulled her arm, and Kara stumbled forward a few steps. Hold your ground, Air ordered her. You cannot have your weapons back until you can pull your wrist from my grasp. Kara tried to free her arm, but she couldn't get it away from the Dracowoman's dragon-like grip. Pull, damn you, pull. Air yelled as if she were a possessed woman. Look at her. Tretch shouted as he laughed from his position in line. Sweat glistened his forehead as he continued with his exercise. Bold was right. She should never have been allowed to join our plebe training. What was Dragon Elder Durin thinking? A few of the boys from Firedrake voiced their agreement, and those from Agamid didn't know what to think. Kara struggled to free herself from Air as she envisioned Turk or Bork dragging her to the post for punishment. I cannot, she screamed. I do not have the strength. My arm is frail. She started crying as she spoke. I cannot. Now she is crying, Tretch sang. Draco warriors do not cry. Send her back to her tribe. Cyan silently watched as Tretch continued to verbally harass Kara. He wasn't sure how he felt about the girl participating in the training instead of his friend Turk. Another boy joined in with Tretch's verbal harassment. He was Vance of the Purple Firedrake hatchling Tyrian. Vance yelled, leave wench. We do not need any women as warriors. Air was about to yell at Kara again when she heard Vance's comment. With a new target in mind, Air turned and threw her spear, and it embedded in the dirt between Vance's legs. He didn't speak again that day, and he hardly ever spoke when instructor Dracowoman Air was around. Tretch also decided to hold his tongue. Air thought about walking over to Vance and beating him nigh of death, but her dragon approached her before she could fulfill her rage desire. Perhaps you are a little harsh with the child, Zephyr spoke. The boy. Air yelled. I should have. Zephyr replied, no, not him. He received what he deserved. I was speaking of the girl. You are demanding a lot out of her, and it is only the first day. Air glanced back at her dragon as she told him, all the more for me to be harsh with her. She has a lot to make up for in less time than these boys do. Or would you prefer she not advance? I am only saying there are other ways. Let me take her under my wing, Zephyr suggested. Air looked at Kara and then back to Zephyr, and then she said out of anger, if you want her, then take her. She moved on to one of the other boys to instruct him as she added, Kara AabiLynn is now your responsibility, and I shall teach her no more. Kara watched as the Dracowoman walked away from her and seemingly abandoned her like so many others had already. Would the Dracowoman really not teach her anymore? Was that not what instructors were supposed to do, was teach? The green speckled copper dragon walked over to Kara and wrapped his wing around her. Black Fire had done the same to her, but Zephyr was 3 times his size and completely blanketed her. Go on, child, cry, he told her. No one shall see you in here. Air can be harsh, but she means well. She wishes for you to advance more than you know, but her methods are more suited to training boys and those who have at least picked up a weapon before. He urged her, it is all right. Go on and cry, for very soon I shall want you to dry your eyes. She relented and cried. Time went on within the leathery cocoon unhindered by the outside world. Kara felt safe within his wing and soon her sobbing subsided. Zephyr slightly parted his wing, so he could speak with her, and he said, you have much to overcome. Are you willing to work hard? Yes, Kara replied as she wiped the wetness from her eyes. I am at least that. Climb on my back, and I shall take you to a place where we can begin your special training, he instructed her. She looked at his large form and saw no harness around his neck or face. Kara also didn't see a saddle and wondered how the Draco warriors stayed on their dragons. She told him, "I have not ridden a dragon. I am a little afraid. We shall walk then. Come with me, child." Zephyr kept his wing around her so that she couldn't see the boys. One of the Venetian red scribes followed them as they walked down the path and left Bio. The scribe decided he should record the events around Kara and kept his distance as they walked down the sloping path. Winfrey returned and met Kara on her way down. "Is everything all right?" Winfrey questioned as she carried a wooden box wrapped in a cloth. "Yes," Zephyr replied. "Kara and I are going to the Hillocks for special training." Winfrey questioned, "Why to Hillocks?" "All that is down in those caverns are hot springs." Zephyr answered, "You shall see." Winfrey inquisitively eyed the Agamid dragon, and then she stated, "I shall accompany you then. I have our midday meal here. You may come," but Zephyr started as he walked on, and Kara followed as he spoke. "Do not interfere with the girls' training." Up on Bio, Gale returned with Chinook after they left the hatchlings with their instructors, and he questioned, "Where is the girl?" Air replied, "She is gone with Zephyr. He has taken pity on her and wants to shelter her from the inevitable failure of her training." "It went that badly?" "Yes," Air answered. "She could not even count to 50 before her shield arm failed her. I do not believe she has what it takes to be a Draco woman." Gale shook his head as he spoke. "That is too bad. Blackfire would have been an asset, and if what I hear is true, a warlock and Leviathan are thought to have been spotted some distance from Athenia's border." "That is disturbing news," Air said. Then she thought for a moment, and she stated, "Blackfire is young enough. Maybe the Dragon Elders can perform the unbinding ceremony and remove his link from Kara." "I shall talk with Dragon Elder Durin," Gale spoke, and then he added, "Of what I am to understand, she was not one of Blackfire's candidates but another dragon's who rejected her, so I am sure that there is not much of a bond to remove between them." Chapter 6. Blackfire's Training. Gale and Chinook had taken the hatchlings to the crystalline canyon where Dragon Elder Durin waited for them. The elder would teach the young dragons to espel, what Athenia dragon magic was called. The crystalline canyon was chosen for its isolation and its thick canyon walls that could take the brunt of espel, making it the ideal place to practice. Gale and Chinook had left, leaving the 12 hatchlings with Dragon Elder Durin. Durin looked at each of the plebe hatchlings, and then he began, "As Athenia dragons, all of you have the inherent ability to espel, and in this class, you shall learn to harness that ability. To battle the Stygian Legion, you must be able to fight fire with fire, as they say. The warlocks and their leviathans are formidable foes, and you have to equal their magic and might if you are to survive an encounter with them. Do not fret though, you have years of training ahead of you before you confront any enemy at home or abroad. Is it true that the Stygian Legion has not been seen in years?" Lavender, one of the Agamid hatchlings of the same color who was slim and long and of medium build, mentally questioned. Durin replied, "That is true, but because we do not see our foes, it does not mean we should forsake our training." Thrasher, another of the Agamid hatchlings who was the color of slate, mentally inquired, "What of King Vis? Is he still alive?" Sky projected, "Would he not be over 1,000 years old? Could a human live that long? The normal lifespan of man is about 100 years, but King Vis is no normal man. He could have extended his life through the dark arts or passed on his throne to his children. Our intelligence of his kingdom is foggy, to say the least." Sky projected, "What about?" Durin interrupted him, "Enough with your questions. Let us begin this day Trek's lessons. Follow me." The Dragon Elder turned and headed away from the hatchlings, and they followed. Dust from the canyon floor rose up as they tread across the rust-colored sand, and Durin led them to an area where hundreds of crystals grew from the ground like saber plants. The crystals consisted of 6 obelisks. One obelisk, that was 3 times the size of the ones surrounding it, rose straight up from the center. The 5 other obelisks stood up out of the bottom of the center, one at a 90-degree angle. The aqua crystals were of all different sizes. They ranged from the ones the size of a hatchling's claw all the way up to the mother of them all, which was the size of Blackfire. Durin walked toward the largest. "These are Vim crystals. They are native of our land. They generate a sphere shield similar to the ones the warlocks use to repel attacks. Once I have taught you how to generate plasma bolts, each of you shall practice penetrating a crystal's sphere shield. This is one of the basic spells that all dragons can conjure, and as you grow older, you shall find that you are better at certain spells than others." Sky placed his talons on the ball-shaped matter that flowed around one of the crystals. He thought the sphere shield might shock him and braced for the bite, but it did nothing to him but prevent him from touching the crystal. He released the sphere shield and non-verbally questioned, "And how do we generate these plasma bolts? It is said that Athenia dragons are born with magic. I do not feel as though I have magic, so how does one use something they believe they do not have? I want to know, so I can defend my homeland." Most of the hatchlings mentally murmured their agreement. "It pleases me to see that all of you are eager to learn," Durin said. "To begin, you must focus your mind on generating a ball of burning energy. The plasma bolt shall form in front of your head. It is your will alone that creates the plasma bolt, and once it has reached the size and power that you want, you must will it to hurl at your target. I shall demonstrate." Durin's serpent eyes glowed blue as a ball of burning cobalt energy formed in front of his head. It was the size of a melon. The plasma bolt hurled forward as if it had been shot from a bow. Then it struck the Vim crystal's sphere shield and penetrated it, and as it did, the sphere shield shattered. Pieces of the sphere shield fell but dissipated before they hit the sand. The plasma bolt struck the center obelisk, the bolt broke apart, and then all 5 obelisks absorbed the energy. The large Vim crystal glowed brightly for a few seconds as it grew slightly, and then once it had absorbed the energy, the crystal began reconstructing its sphere shield. Your attack did not destroy it. Black fire projected as he walked around the struck crystal. Why is that? Vim crystals absorb the energy of our attacks, and that is why we have selected them to practice our spell abilities upon them. And as you can see, the plasma bolts do not hurt them. They actually feed them. We have formed a symbiotic relationship with the crystals. The first rule of Athenia dragons is that our spell should not be used to hurt things. It should only be used to protect others and defend our lands. It should never be used out of malice. Bold questioned, and many of the Agamit hatchlings turned his way, amazed that one so young could verbally speak. Do we not hurt others when we defend our lands? Do we not kill to eat? The first rule you have spoken to us does not make sense. Yes, we hurt and kill defending our lands, but we should never hurt or kill for sport or out of lust, greed, or hate, Durin replied, and then he lifted one of his claws as he said, "And before you state that we hate our enemies, know one thing, hatchling. If the only reason you kill someone is out of hate, it is murder." Bold considered if he killed Kara if it would be thought of as murder. He already had hatred in his heart, all he needed was the intent. Durin addressed everyone, "I want all of you to spread out and select your own crystal to practice on, and for now, select a small crystal. The larger the crystal, the more powerful the sphere shield. The goal is to generate a plasma bolt. We shall work on shattering or penetrating the sphere shield in the day treks to come. So go on and find your own crystal." Black Fire walked over to a small crystal and stood before it, and then Bold walked up and selected the same crystal. "I was here first," Bold said. "Find your own elsewhere." Black Fire growled at the deviant hatchling as he projected. "I was here first, so move on, Pale One." Bold hissed at him as he spoke. "I shall not move on. You shall have to make me." The murky black hatchling snorted a small ebony-colored flame and glanced at the dragon elder as Durin watched them. Black Fire decided that a fight over a crystal wasn't a battle he wanted to engage in, so he turned and moved to the far side of the canyon to another crystal, and far away from the Pale One. All the hatchlings began visualizing the plasma bolts. Right away, Bold generated a small plasma bolt the size of a walnut. Then he focused his mind as his serpent eyes glowed blue, and he shot it at the sphere shield. The plasma bolt penetrated it and hit the center obelisk, and then it and the other obelisks absorbed the energy and slightly grew with the intake of food. Durin moved to the small pale hatchling and said, "Well done, Bold. It seems you shall have a knack for spell. Kara was correct in selecting you for the dragon Rite. It is too bad you decided to select another in her place. Are you going to hold that against me for the rest of my life?" Bold inquired. "And who is to say I selected incorrectly? I doubt she shall make it past the 5th act." "No, I shall not hold it against you forever," Durin replied. "I only wanted to remind you that the faith of that girl is the only reason you are here." "Oh, I know, and I shall never forget the reason I am toiling under the hot sun. She is the reason I decided to fly, or do you not remember what I said while on the middle ground during the end of the 4th act?" "I remember," Durin answered. "Everyone who was there shall remember what you did and how you acted. You should know, the elders are keeping their eye on you. Step out of line in the least, and you shall be eliminated from the dragon Rite." "Oh, you do not have to tell me. I know a target has been placed on my back, so I shall tread lightly, or is it that I am trying to get kicked out?" I am a lazy dragon after all. Lazy is not a word that comes to mind when I think of you, Durin told him, and then he moved to the next hatchling as he spoke. Many unkind words come to mind, but not lazy. Bold continued practicing what he thought would be tedious and unrewarding. He never imagined he would enjoy Espel, but he found it exhilarating to use his magical ability, and wondered what else he could do with it. Were there any limits except for the ridiculous moral ones Dragon Elder Durin mentioned? Within the next few hours, all of the hatchlings except for Blackfire had generated a plasma bolt. Not all of the plasma bolts penetrated the sphere shields, but they did successfully produce their first Espel. Durin moved to Blackfire, concerned that the one he thought would be his star pupil had yet to generate a simple plasma bolt. "How are you doing?" Durin questioned him. "It seems you are having trouble." "I am," Blackfire projected. "I am visualizing the bolt in front of me as you instructed, but nothing happens." "I shall have you try something else then," Durin stated. "All I want you to do is visualize a speck of energy in front of your head. This is the basics of the first Espel, and some hatchlings can do this right out of the egg, so we shall build upon this and then move on to the plasma bolt." "I shall try," Blackfire non-verbally replied, and then he closed his eyes and focused his mind on generating a small speck of energy. His brow wrinkled with his efforts, and after a while, frustration planted itself on his face as he opened his eyes. "Nothing is happening," he projected. "What am I doing wrong? I do not know. Maybe your Espel is locked and only needs to be unlocked. I have heard of this happening to hatchlings. Their magic is so strong that their body locks it away until they are mature enough to use it. There is a ceremony we can perform to unlock your Espel. I shall have you and Kara meet with me and a few of the elders and perform the ceremony later this evening. For now, go find your rider and eat your midday meal. Rest a little before the ceremony, for it shall take a lot out of you. I shall send somebody for you when it is time." "I understand," Blackfire telepathized, and then he turned, walked a few steps, flapped his wings, and flew off. Dirk, who had been next to Blackfire, turned to the Dragon Elder and projected, "Do you believe that his Espel is that powerful that his body had to lock it away?" "It is my theory," Durin answered and spoke to all the hatchlings. "Return to your practice. We shall continue until your midday meal is brought to you." Chapter 7. The Elders Gather. Later that day, Dragon Elder Wellwise and his rider, Elder Dracum and Cosmo, came in from teaching young Dracoriders advanced flight techniques and found Syllabary leaving the great meeting chamber. Dragon Elder Wellwise was dark green with 3 stripes of black running along his spine. Elder Dracum and Cosmo was part of the dark-skinned tribe of men from Zanzibar, and he had a shaven head. The 3 of them paused at the entrance. Syllabary had long ago finished his earlier meeting with a few scribes and had recorded some more details on his convey scroll before leaving. "We heard about the Leviathan and the Warlock near the border of Athenia," Elder Dracum and Cosmo stated. "Has there been any new reports?" Syllabary answered, "No, nothing new." Dragon Elder Wellwise stated, "If there is no new report, why were we summoned?" "That is a good question," Syllabary stated. "I was not informed why the 2 of you were summoned. I was actually on my way out. Is some sort of meeting going on?" Dragon Elder Sagehall and his rider, Elder Dracum and Norseman, entered the great meeting chamber, and Syllabary's question remained unanswered. Elder Dracum and Norseman was a very light-skinned, fiery-haired member of the tribe of men from Veldun, and Dragon Elder Sagehall had hide the color of deep brown dirt, and was the largest male dragon at Firedrake. "I see that we were not the only ones summoned," Dragon Elder Sagehall stated. "Durin must have summoned all of you as well." Syllabary asked, "Why were you summoned?" "A plebe hatchling is unable to use Espel," Dragon Elder Sagehall replied. "Durin believes the hatchling's magic has been locked away, and we are going to perform a ceremony to unlock it." The 5 of them moved and walked to the center of the great meeting chamber. "I have never heard of such a thing," Syllabary stated. "This shall be a unique opportunity to observe and record. I wonder why Durin did not inform me. Maybe he has a new favorite scribe," Dragon Elder Sagehall replied. Dragon Elder Durin walked in and overheard the scribe and Sagehall, and so Durin stated, "I do not know if Syllabary was ever my favorite. As for why you were not informed, that would be due to the time. I only requested the ceremony a few hours ago. Do not fret, I would have remembered the scribes." Durin looked around, and then he stated, "I see that we have all gathered except for Dragon Elder Jamborn and Elder Dracum and Bensine. We are here," Dragon Elder Jamborn spoke as if he were out of breath. His hide was red like plum jam, and he had spikes running from the tip of his nose, along his spine, and all the way down to the tip of his tail. Elder Dracum Bensine was with him. He had long blonde hair, slightly graying, and his skin was tanned from long exposure to the sun. We now wait for the hatchling and his rider, Durin stated. The tunnels leading to the great meeting chamber. Blackfire and Kara were quiet as they followed the young Venetian red scribe that had been ordered to bring them to the elders. He was the same scribe who had followed Kara off of Bio. Winfrey was also with them. Blackfire had explained to Kara and Winfrey why they were going to the great meeting chamber. How did your training go? Blackfire asked the gloom-steeped Kara with his thoughts. He noticed since they had met up again that something was bothering her. She replied, I suppose it went well. He projected, why would you say that? What happened? Kara despondently muttered, all I did was make Instructor Dracaumenair angry with me, and then I was ushered off to soak in the hot springs with her dragon. Instructor Zephyr. Zephyr said he was giving me special training, but it did not seem like training to me. It seemed more like he wanted to get out of teaching and go soak in the hot springs, and I was a good excuse to go do so. Winfrey didn't understand the instructor's reasoning. They shouldn't have pulled Kara out of the first day of training. It was like they had already given up on her. Winfrey had a mind to speak with Dragon Elder Durin about it. Kara bowed her head ashamed of so many things as she told Blackfire. It would seem that our first day of training did not go well. What if I am unable to use the weapons as I should? Shall they kick me out of the dragon Rite? What shall happen to me if they do remove me? Shall I be forced to return to Turkenborg? Shall I have to return to a slave's life? Shall I lose you, Blackfire? Winfrey answered, never. Even if you cannot become a Dracauman, there are still things that a dragon and his rider can do. So do not fret, child. The scribe that led them diligently listened to their conversation, and soon the four of them entered the great meeting chamber. Dragon Elder Durin commanded, come over here, Blackfire and Kara, and we shall begin the ceremony. Winfrey, please wait by the entrance, and young scribe, take your position. The young scribe, Hatchlings, noticed Syllabary and moved and stood by him. Hatchlings questioned, were you also summoned to record this event? Syllabary replied, trying not to take offense that he hadn't been called, I shall also take record. You shall observe the riders, and I the dragons. Understood, Hatchlings replied, and then he removed his convey scroll from his leather satchel and commanded the scroll. Expositus. It magically lifted from his hands, unrolled, and hovered in front of him. Hatchlings removed his blazing quill and began writing the events he witnessed as Syllabary did the same. Dragon Elder Durin ordered, Blackfire, stand in the middle of us four dragons. Kara, stand between the three Dracaumen. The plebes moved to their positions. If I may ask, why am I here? Kara questioned, a little afraid of the men she stood between, for they seemed like Bork and Turk, great hunters and men hardened by the elements. You and Blackfire are bonded, so anything that happens to him affects you and the other way around, Durin explained. If we are going to attempt this, we need you to keep your heart quieted so that his three hearts shall stay quiet. This must be done if we are to succeed. She thought for a moment, and then she said, I do not fully understand what you are saying, but if you say that I need to be here for Blackfire, I cannot say no. Dragon Elder Sagehall stated, let us begin. His thunderous voice changed and became soothing as he spoke, Hatchling Blackfire, we shall need you to quiet your thoughts and your hearts. There is nothing to fear here. You and your rider are safe here. Now surrender to us, so we may unlock your spell. Blackfire projected, I understand. I trust and surrender to you. He kept repeating, I shall quiet my thoughts and my mind. I shall quiet my thoughts and my mind. The four dragon elders chanted, Great Turkria, hear our plea. Turkria, the one who dwelled in the past, the one who dwells now, and the one who shall dwell, hear us. We lift up this hatchling to you. Unlock his spell so he can become a great warrior. Unlock what his body has put away. Unlock his power. They repeated the chant over and over, and the dragon elder's eyes glowed blue as a swirl of energy encompassed the murky black hatchling like a mini cyclone. The swirling energy intensified, crackling with vim, and Blackfire felt its power around him. Syllabary was in awe by the small display of spell. He wasn't sure if the unlocking ceremony had ever been recorded and was excited by the idea that he and the young scribe may be the first ones to put it under the quill. The Dracaumen laid their hands on Kara and kept her from moving away from them. They sensed her trepidation caused by the uncertainty of what was going on around her. Elder Dracum and Cosmo stated, "Do not fear, child." As the elder said, "There is nothing for you to fear here. You are both safe." Elder Dracum and Norseman added, "Why not close your eyes and stretch out your feelings toward your dragon? He is in a state of tranquility. He shall help calm your heart and your mind." "I shall try," Kara told them as she stretched out her thoughts and quickly found Blackfire's. And as Norseman said, Blackfire's mind was at peace, and it lessened her fears. When she connected with him, she felt the dragon elder's chant encircling Blackfire. She felt its power surge and encircle her as it had her hatchling. The rush of energy seemed to electrify her body all the way through to her marrow. Dragon Elder Wellwise questioned the other elders as they chanted, "Do you feel his spell?" "I do not sense any magic." "The lock must be very powerful. We must chant harder." They intensified their efforts, and Blackfire felt the power around him, but it didn't affect him within. He was sure something was supposed to happen, but nothing did. Kara continued to feel the Dragon Elder's power around her, and it made her feel like she was drowning. She felt trapped by their spell, so her mind searched for the surface as an ocean swimmer would search who had been under too long. Kara tried to step away from the three Elder Dracomen, but they held her in place with their strong hands on her shoulders. The three men closed their eyes and focused as the dragon's spell engulfed them and the entire room. They had to concentrate so that the power didn't affect them. Hlisnan's blazing quill flew across his convey scroll as the fiery light lit up his determined face. He would record all and leave nothing out. He was an excellent recorder, swift and accurate. His healing ability was lacking, but he made up for it by being one of the fastest inscribers. As soon as he filled the page, the record whisked off to his chronicle tome, and he started filling the page again from the top. Hlisnan sensed the magic within the cyclone as he knew there was magic within his quill and scroll. He glanced at Blackfire for a second and saw the energy whirl around the hatchling. They had told him about this moment, that it was possible the dragon elders might unlock what had been shut away, and now he bore witness to it. He had the honor of the first-hand account. The spell engulfed the girl as it did her hatchling. They were a bonded pair, after all. Then, as they had told him, he witnessed something truly miraculous. Black flames seeped from the hatchling's mouth and nostrils as if the dragon was giving up his spirit. Hlisnan turned back to the girl. He knew he couldn't be distracted by the young dragon. The hatchling wasn't his subject but the girl, and he saw Kara open her eyes. Hlisnan peeked at the hatchling again. There was no doubt. The elder Dracoman didn't see, too busy concentrating. His eyes widened with the wonder he beheld. For now, he was alone in his awe, but once the others reviewed his record in his chronicle tome, everyone would know. It had to have worked. The spell had to have been released. Flames continued to seep out of Blackfire as if they were liquid. The Dragon Elder's spell also made the hatchling sick, but he bore it until he sensed Kara's fear and broke from the calm state he was in. He projected to the Dragon Elders, "We need to stop. Something is not right. Kara is in danger." The Dragon Elders ceased their chanting, and the cyclone of energy dissipated. The unlocking of the murky black hatchling had been disrupted. Kara wasn't sure how the Elder Dracoman endured the queasiness the spell brought. It dragged her into its depths like an undertow. She heard Blackfire's projected voice and was finally able to break free from the ocean of spell and surface back to reality. Kara gasped for air several times as she grabbed her chest. Hlisnan halted his record, and then he inquired, "What has happened?" Durin replied, "We are not sure. The ceremony should have worked." He faced the hatchling and then questioned him, "Blackfire, do you see the large Vim crystal that is in the center of the great meeting chamber table?" Blackfire turned his head and looked at the large circular table in the center of the room with over a dozen wooden stools around it, and then he projected, "I do. Try shooting your plasma bolt at the crystal," Durin commanded. Blackfire focused as he had been taught, but he couldn't create a bolt. "This is most disturbing," Dragon Elder Sagehall said, and then he questioned, "Did we fail in the unlocking?" "I thought you did not finish," Elder Dracum and Cosmos stated. "We were disrupted, but the unlocking should not have taken so long," Dragon Elder Wellwise stated, and then he added, "Maybe this hatchling has no spell. Maybe there was nothing to unlock." Durin uttered, "That is unheard of. All Athenia dragons have spell. It is their birthright." Sagehall spoke, "There is one way we can know for sure." Hlisnan questioned, "What way is that?" Sage Hall motioned to the great meeting chamber table with his claw, and then he stated, "Have black fire touch the Vim crystal. It shall absorb any magic it comes in contact with, even if that magic is dormant inside a body." Agitated over the time they had wasted, Wellwise's nostrils flared as he snorted steam. He said, "We should have done this to begin with." "Why would we have?" Durin asked him, and then he stated, "All Athenia dragons have Espel." He walked over to the hatchling, and then ordered him, "Go on, black fire, touch the crystal." Durin generated a plasma bolt and hurled it at the crystal, destroying its sphere shield, and then he commanded, "Quickly now, before the shield regenerates." Black fire turned to his rider as his heart pounded in his chest. The fate of both he and Kara laid in the balance of his next action. He walked over to the table and then crawled on top of it, and he placed his talons on the crystal, and it did nothing. Sage Hall grumbled with a booming voice, "This is a paramount catastrophe. Never in recorded history has an Athenia dragon not of Espel. What does it mean? Is this an ill omen?" Durin shook his head as he replied, "I do not know. So many unusual things have happened during this dragon rite. Something is amiss, and perhaps you are not amiss to mention an ill omen." He turned and looked at the plebes whose faces were a little pale, and he knew that they worried about their future. Durin questioned, now what to do with Blackfire and Kara. Only Espel can fight against the warlocks, and without it, they cannot become a Dracowoman and her dragon. "It is a shame," Wellwise said. "We shall have to find a suitable job for them." He repeated, "It is a shame." Firedrake was already down by 4 plebe groups this year for the dragon rite, and now they are losing one, and it is only the first day of plebe training. I would have to agree. This does seem like an ill-fated omen. Lisnan stated, "Perhaps they could work at the mines. Blackfire shall be a large dragon once he is grown, and his might shall be put to good use there." "The mines," Wellwise uttered. "I was thinking more along the lines of a courier. Dwarves usually work our mines." Elder Dracum and Norseman thought of something, and then he questioned, "If Blackfire cannot Espel, shall he be able to fetter with Kara? If they cannot fetter, they cannot fly and they cannot become couriers." "That is a good question," Elder Dracum and Cosmo said. "But I also think we are getting ahead of ourselves. We do not expect any of the other plebes to fetter yet." Durin rubbed his chin with 2 of his claws as he considered the question. He stated after a few moments, "I do not believe fettering is linked with Espel. It has more to do with the dragon and rider's bond. It is also too early to try fettering, as Cosmo stated." Wellwise spoke. "So we shall have to wait and see." Sage Hall said, "The question still remains. What do we do with them?" "We do not need to decide their task at this moment," Durin replied. "There is time, so let us give it some thought." Sage Hall nodded, and then he spoke. "We can all agree that Blackfire and Kara are to be disqualified from the rest of the dragon rite." Wellwise replied, "Yes, I agree to that. I heard Kara was having problems with her weapons training, so maybe it is for the best." Kara glanced at Blackfire and mumbled to him, "They do know we are standing right here." Blackfire's mind was silent to hers, as if he completely turned off the mind sync between them. Since they mind synced the day he had marked her, they were always connected in some small way, but that seemed to be gone now, or something interfered with it. She worried about Blackfire as he seemed to plummet into despair. Durin heard her utterance and voted, "I also agree. If Blackfire cannot produce Espel, there is no need for them to continue their plebe training." He looked at the 2 of them, and then he told them, "I am sorry. I do not know what else to say. For now, the 2 of you return to your quarters. I know this has been a trying day for you. Winfrey shall get anything that you need. Try not to fret. We shall find a purpose for you both within Firedrake. We only need to find what your task shall be." Winfrey said, "Come, we shall go have some tea." Blackfire, Kara, and Winfrey returned to their quarters. After they left, Lisnan voiced with excitement, "We should not hide them away. No, this could be of importance. I should follow them during their daily task and record." "What do you mean?" Syllabary questioned. "As you all have said, never before has there been an Athenia dragon that cannot Espel. Perhaps if I follow them and observe them, I can get to the bottom of why he has no Espel." Lisnan commanded his convey scroll to roll up, Colossus. He placed it in his satchel as he questioned, "Are we 100% sure that his egg came from the queen?" Durin answered, "I am. I was there and can attest that the hatchling is hers." Lisnan inquired, "What of the father?" Wellwise said, "I shall have to look back. There were at least 3 dragons that mounted her during the time of copulation. Once I have their names, I can look back through their lineage, and even though it is unheard of, I can see if there were any other dragons besides Athenia dragons in their family tree. I did not know your kind could mate with other dragons, Syllabary said. We have no problems with mating with other dragon species. Usually, the union does not create offspring, Sage Hall replied. But it would not hurt to look into the records at the Scribe Hall. Syllabary added, I shall also request from the Scribe Hall any information they might have on Athenia dragons, and Espel. We should hear from them within the next couple of days. Durin stated, I shall tell the instructors that Kara and Blackfire have been pulled from the training. We should find them something to do while we are deciding what task they shall be assigned to. They should not be cooped up in their quarters while we decide. Cosmo suggested, Blackfire could help me and Wellwise hunt tomorrow. It is our day to stalk deer meat. That would mean leaving Kara behind, Durin said. Do not forget that they have not learned to fetter. Then I shall think of something the two of them can do by tomorrow, Cosmo said. Do so and let me know what you come up with, Durin spoke, and then he glanced up at the ceiling where the sunshine through a dome made of Vim crystal. The dome was positioned over the great meeting chamber table. Durin said, it is nearing the evening meal. I call this meeting adjourned. We shall meet again tomorrow as the sun rises. Everyone headed out, and Syllabary and Dragon Elder Durin walked out together. Durin lowered his voice as he spoke. Hatchlings was very excited about the unlocking ceremony, and that we failed to unlock the Espel. Syllabary grinned as he said, I also noticed that, but he is still young and has not trained himself to hide his emotions. It shall come with time. What do you plan to do with Kara and Blackfire? You mean their task? I do not know yet. Something is unusual about them. Are they an ill-fated omen, as Wellway said? Are they a sign of things to come? Are more Athenia dragon hatchlings going to be born without Espel? If so, how shall we defend ourselves from the Stygian Legion? Those are all very good questions, and I fear that we need to find the answers quickly now that the Stygian Legion has been spotted near the border. I believe it is only a matter of time before they cross, Syllabary said. For all our sakes, I pray that Blackfire is a fluke. Durin glanced at the scribe as he questioned him, Are you saying that the great Torcria creates mistakes? Syllabary was appalled by the idea, and he insisted, I would never say that. Still, what does it all mean? Chapter 8. The Trials of the Downtrodden. The next few days, Elder Dracum and Cosmo and Dragon Elder Wellwise assigned Kara and Blackfire to different tasks. She never got the chance to wear the plebe riding outfit but was forced to wear a white long-sleeve tunic and brown pants of a servant. Kara hated wearing the clothes because they reminded her of her slave life. Winfrey told her she would only have to wear the outfit until the elders selected a task for her, and then Kara would wear the clothes associated with that task. Hatchlings followed them around everywhere they went and only allowed them privacy when they went to their quarters. They were at least assigned new quarters that Blackfire could comfortably grow in and where neither of them had lived before. Kara and Blackfire helped out in the kitchen, but the murky black hatchling was so big he kept turning over tables and spilling pots and pans in the tight confines. Next, Kara and Blackfire mucked out one of the animal stables. Wellwise didn't like that idea, so on the third day, Cosmo had them delivering food trays. Once it got back to the Elder Dracumen that the plebes and older trainees were teasing and some of them harassing the displaced pair, and that Blackfire almost came to blows with an older dragon. That task was stopped before the end of the morning meal. On the fourth day, Cosmo went ahead and had Blackfire help the dragon and Ryder, who was on hunting duty. But since Kara couldn't go with them, her absence distracted Blackfire so much that he was no help in the hunts. On the fifth day, Cosmo had them take a break as he tried to figure out what task they would be suitable at. It was only an excuse because he couldn't think of anything else for them to do until they were able to fetter. After morning meal, Kara and Blackfire went up to the bioplateau because she wanted to watch the plebes practice. The boys had gotten so much better over the few days they had been practicing without her. They didn't seem to miss her. She was a little jealous that she had been left behind and yet happy for them because they were doing so well. She would have been proud to work beside them if only she could. A few of the boys glanced in her direction when she arrived and saw her watching them. Instructor Dracum Gale and Instructor Dracum Air had left the boys alone to practice their spear strikes. Most of them went back to their practice without another thought of her. Tretch couldn't take his eyes off of her. There was something about Kara that made him want to tease her. He heard that she had been demoted to serving meals, but he didn't have the wicked pleasure of her serving him. He would have liked it very much. Look who is spying on us. Tretch shouted as he smirked. The girl who thought she could be a Dracowoman. Maybe her current task as a meal servant does not occupy her enough that she has to come and spy on us. She blushed, wondering if they had heard of her other exploits in the kitchen and stable. It was bad enough that she had been removed from the dragon rite, but now she would be tormented about it. Cyan yelled, "Leave her alone. Why do you feel as though you need to pick on her?" Tretch asked, "You question my actions. Were you not one of the ones who threatened to hurt her during the breaking dawn?" "I never threatened her. It is true that Turk did, but I myself never did. I might not have said it, but I was glad that a girl was part of our class." Cyan turned his attention to her, and he told her, "I am sincerely sorry that your hatchling is unable to spell. I believe you could have overcome your deformity and learned the spear and shield." Tretch blurted, "That is not what you told me yesterday." "And what do you claim that I said yesterday?" Cyan inquired. "You told me that you could not see how someone with an arm such as hers could ever raise a shield against a warlock's spells, let alone keep the shield in place against a leviathan's claws and teeth." Tears welled in Kara's eyes, and black fire growled softly. She put her hand upon his shoulder to quiet him, not wanting him to attack anyone as he had during that morning meal. She realized how bad of an idea it was to come and watch. It was just that she felt so left out. Cyan shouted, "You took what I said out of context." "I said." Before he finished, Kara and her hatchling turned and left. Cyan glared at Tretch, and then he said, "I have a mind to punch you in the face and knock you to the ground." "I would like to see you try," Tretch declared as he took a step toward Cyan. "I believe it would be you who would be on the ground holding your bloody nose." They would have gone at each other if Instructor Dracowoman hadn't returned at that moment. She nearly knocked the both of them to the ground for misbehaving while she was gone. Kara left Bio and aimlessly walked around Firedrake. She had no destination in mind, but soon she found herself and her hatchling at Crystalline Canyon, watching the other hatchlings perform spell on the Vim crystals. Black fire projected, "Why have we come here?" Kara shook herself from the daze she had been in, and she answered him, "I do not know. Maybe I sensed that you wanted to come as I had wanted to go to Bio to watch those I would have been practicing with. I do not believe I had such a desire. I knew it would upset you, so I." Bold noticed the two of them, and while Dragon Elder Durin occupied himself with another hatchling, Bold slunk over to them. Through the link he shared with Tretch, he knew what his rider had said to her and inquired, "Was Tretch's belittling not enough that you had to come here so that I might do the same?" Kara sensed that Blackfire wanted to charge the pale hatchling and end his vile mouth, so she blocked his forward advancement by stretching her right arm across her hatchling's chest. Blackfire calmed down a bit. "Of everyone who is here besides Blackfire," Kara started, "I thought you would understand, but I am wrong. I have been wrong about many things regarding you. You had told me you had no desire to become a warrior. It was only out of spite for me that you attained your breaking dawn." She held in the urge to yell at him, but it took everything she had as she said, "You must be so pleased." Bold asked, "Why is that?" "I shall never be a Dracowoman. Did you see that in me from the beginning? Did you see that I would fail?" Black fire projected, "Kara, do not say that. You are not a—" "Please be quiet. I am speaking with Bold," she interrupted. Blackfire wanted to protect her from the hurtful words that were coming. But since she needed to finish talking with the Pale One and hear what Bold had to say, against his better judgment, he quieted his thoughts. She spoke to Bold, "Did you see it? Did you see it in me from the beginning?" Bold tilted his head as he examined her. He saw that her eyes were red from an earlier crying and that they were ready to burst forth with tears again. He felt a small pang in his chest, and he wondered if it was pity that he felt for her or something else. "I have always seen it in you," Bold finally replied. "You refuse to accept who you are. You refuse to accept your limitations. Whatever made you choose to believe that you could be a Dracowoman? I do not believe you are stupid, overly optimistic, yes, but not stupid. So why did you believe? Why did you believe that we could have gone on to become great warriors?" Kara tried not to cry, but her voice gave away the heavy heart she carried as she replied, "The answer is simple. Because you were by my side. As my hatchling, I thought we could do anything. I thought you believed in me because I believed in you, and because of that, I thought we could do anything." Her words stunned Bold to silence. He didn't know how to feel or what to say, and then he noticed that Dragon Elder Durin looked their way. Bold told her, "I need to get back to my training before I am scolded. I am glad that you finally see what your position in life is." He slunk off back to his crystal and started hurling plasma bolts at it. Blackfire admitted to her through their mind sync, "What you said to him makes me a little jealous. I understand the feelings you have for him and that you have them now for me, but still. He was the first one you put your hope in, and I can never claim that." Kara turned and hugged her hatchling as she whispered, "Please do not be jealous. I did not understand that you were the one meant for me. I did not understand a lot of things. If I had, maybe I would have realized how Bold really felt about me and that Tretch would steal away what I thought was mine." She stepped back and stared up at his adorable reptile face. She smiled as she told him, "Blackfire, you are my hope now. But I cannot perform a spell. I am a fluke, a mistake." She scolded, "Never say that. The great Torcria does not make mistakes. How can you believe that?" She looked at her stunted left arm as she spoke. "Because he created me. I have to believe that or everyone is right about me, and they cannot be right." Kara fisted her hands as she took one more look at Bold, and then she said as she limped away, "They cannot be, and I shall still prove them wrong. Come, we have work to do." "What kind of work?" Blackfire asked as he followed in the wake of her focused path. "They might have removed us from the dragon rite, but we are going to keep practicing," she told him as she quickened their pace, and they started to leave the crystalline canyon. "I still have my weapons. We shall collect them and head out to the desert. I remember seeing a place that had Vim crystals when I rode with Bork, and it is not too far from Firedrake. I shall say we are going on a picnic if anyone stops us." "Does that include me?" a voice inquired. A shadow stood before them, and Kara up and stopped, and Blackfire almost ran over her. "Winfrey," Kara uttered as she searched the area, but she didn't see anyone else. She lowered her voice and questioned her attendant, "Did you overhear what I was saying?" Winfrey folded her arms as she told her, "I did, and what do you think you are doing?" Kara insisted, "I shall not let you stop me. No one else believes in us, so we are going to take our destiny in our own hands and talons." Her voice slowly rose as Kara declared, "I believe we can do this. We only need time, so I shall not let—" "Child," Winfrey interrupted. "What I meant to say was, why are you not including me in your plans? It would be a lot easier if you had someone helping you keep this secret training a secret." Kara breathed a sigh of relief, and then she asked, "Shall you help us?" "Yes. Now let me go get your weapons, then I shall fix a picnic, and we shall meet it in Knockpass, and from there, we shall go to your destination. Once we are there, you can practice to your heart's peace of mind." Kara was so happy to have someone else rooting for them and assisting them that she wrapped her arms around the woman and exclaimed, "Thank you. Thank you. You are welcome, and I would suggest that you keep the excitement down, at least while we are around others. Now go on. Go to the pass, and I shall meet you there shortly. You have much work to do if you are to become a Dracowman." Winfrey glanced around, and then she inquired, "Where is your constant shadow?" "Do you mean the young scribe?" "I do not know. I have not seen him since we came to the canyon." "Why do you ask?" "It is hard to keep a secret with them around. I also do not see him. Maybe he has moved on to a new assignment. Though, I do not understand his interest in you." "In me? What do you mean?" Winfrey explained to her, "Scribes usually record events, not persons, but what do I know? Go on, and I shall meet you at the pass." Winfrey gathered all the supplies they needed, including midday meals for all three of them, and started to head out when Dragon Elder Durin approached her. There was no hint on her face of the plans Kara had. Durin hurried toward her as his heavy frame pounded across the sandy floor of the tunnels, and then he spoke out of breath, "Finally, I found one of you. Where are Kara and Blackfire?" She replied, "They decided to get away from Firedrake for the day trek and have a picnic in the desert." "I see. Well, please tell Kara and Blackfire that the plebes and other trainees at Firedrake shall be leaving for about 7 days. The time of endurance has come." "It seems a little early for it," Winfrey stated. "It is, but since one of the Stygian Legion was spotted near the border, the elders thought it would be wise to move forward with the plebes and other trainees' survivalist training. Dragon Elder Wellwise shall remain and a few other Draco warriors and their dragons. I shall leave Kara and Blackfire in your care while we are gone. I am sure you can find them something to do. Elder Dracum Cosmo is a little frustrated with this task, so I give it to you." Winfrey smirked before she spoke. The children were too much for him. Now that is a laugh. She shifted the item she held in her arms, and then she said, "I shall keep them busy. Have fun camping. I always do. Goodbye," Durin said, and then he turned and headed back. She walked out of the caves and headed for Kara and Blackfire. Elder Durin, Elder Dracum and Norseman called to the dragon from a connecting tunnel. Durin slowed his pace so that the Elder Dracumen could catch up, and then he questioned him, "What is it?" Norseman replied, "We heard from Yang through one of the scribes. They have sent one of their couriers with an important message that needs at least 2 elders' signatures. When should we expect the courier?" Durin questioned. "They should have already arrived. The rider and dragon have never been to our nest, so we believe they might have gotten lost. I have ordered 2 of our Draco riders to go in search of them. Bring the courier to me once they are found, and I also want you to tell Sage Hall that he may begin the journey to Fire Lake. I shall follow once the matter with the courier is taken care of." At once, Norseman stated, and then he continued through the tunnel, then out to the finger mounds, and mounted his pair, Sage Hall. Durin sighed, yearning for the days when his rider fettered with him. He glanced behind himself, thinking of Kara and Blackfire. It was a shame about those 2. Sometime later, Winfrey found Kara and Blackfire at Enoch Pass, and she told them, "Let us head out. It shall already be late for the midday meal. By the way, Dragon Elder Durin wanted me to tell you that the majority of the dragons and riders along with the plebes and trainees are heading out to Fire Lake for the time of endurance." "What is the time of endurance?" Kara asked as she led them toward the place she had seen the Vim crystals. "It is 6 to 7 days of survivalist training done the hard way, at least for the plebes. Every year there is a time of endurance. Plebes and trainees are sent off by themselves with only a knife, a flintstone, a water bota, a bedroll, and their spear and shield. They are to survive on their own, including hunting for their food. The plebes usually last about 3 or 4 days. The goal is to stay out until summoned back. We should do the same," Kara said. "We should also do this time of endurance. We shall start tomorrow. We shall return later tonight and gather our things and go and stay at the place I am taking you now. We should not miss out on any of our training." It pleased Winfrey to see that Kara hadn't lost her enthusiasm, as Winfrey said, "I believe that is a very good idea. So starting tomorrow, you are on your own. When we return tonight, I shall gather enough supplies for me to have a nice vacation for the next 6 days. I believe I can even get a tent for myself. Yes, this shall be a nice break." Kara took them to the place along the Redstone Trail she had traveled along from her home in the northern grass plains with Turk and Bork. She tried not to think of them and focused on branding a new future for herself and her hatchling. Every once in a while, she would glance back as if searching for someone. "Is something the matter?" Blackfire projected. "You keep looking over your shoulder." "I am not sure. I feel as though someone is following us," Kara replied. "Maybe I am only uneasy because we are doing this in secret. Do you want me to fly around and see if anyone is following us?" He asked. "No, I am sure no one is. Who would be following us?" Winfrey said, "Maybe that young scribe who has been surveilling you is continuing to do so." It took them about 3 hours on foot to reach the place along the trail that had orange-yellow sand. 2 small crystals set off from the Hardstone Trail, and Kara, excited to have arrived, led them past the crystals, over an embankment, down a small hill, and up a larger hill. At the top, they saw a whole field of Vim crystals set between 2 hills. The field lay directly below them in more of the orange-yellow sand and was only about 1/10 of the size of the one at Crystalline Canyon. A small pool fed by a spring lay to the right of the field in the red hardstone, and beyond the pool, a cliffside walled in the area. The pool was 50 feet long and 30 feet wide. "Look at this small valley," Kara exclaimed as her eyes widened. "This is perfect." She pointed as she said, "Blackfire can practice down there in the field." She pointed over to the pool and added, "And over there is a flat area of stone where I can practice my spear thrusts, and no one can see us from the trail." Kara couldn't help herself and ran down the sandy hill and into the valley. She rushed over to the pool, knelt, scooped up some water, and slurped the refreshing cool liquid, and it was sweet. Her hatchling thundered down the hill as excited as her. He kicked up sand, leapt over her, and splashed into the water, causing a small tidal wave. The wave rushed over her and nearly knocked her down. "Hey!" Kara exclaimed, and then she stood as if soup had been spilled all over her. She uttered as if disgusted, "Now I am all wet." Water dripped from her hair and long-sleeved shirt as Winfrey walked down the hill laughing all the way, and then she joined them near the waterside. She told the girl, "I would not worry about being wet. In this arid desert air, your clothing shall dry out soon." Blackfire, Kara started, trying not to sound scolding. As much as I would love to play, we need to get to work. She shook her arms and droplets flew all over the place, and then she ran her hands through her hair and wrung out the water. Kara told him, "Come on. We can swim later." She took her weapons from Winfrey, unwrapped the shield and spear, walked some distance from the pool, but kept to the stone ground, and began her spear thrust. She counted softly to herself, pouting like a toddler whose toy was taken away. Blackfire dragged himself out of the pool and then headed over to the crystals, and once he arrived there, he focused as Dragon Elder Durin had instructed him. Blackfire tried to produce a plasma bolt. Winfrey walked around the rocks near the pool and found a perfect place for her to set up the midday meal. She prepared their food, and then after about a half hour passed, Winfrey called them to come and eat. They quickly devoured their midday meal, and then they returned to practice, determined to prove to those who thought they couldn't succeed that they would find a way. Winfrey slowly enjoyed her food as she watched them train. Kara nonverbally supported her hatchling through their mind sync as she worked on her spear thrust. She didn't know it, but it was the first time she spoke to him with her mind while not touching him. She telepathized, "Do not give up. They say you have no spell and that I cannot hold a shield or spear against a Leviathan. I say that there is still a way for us to protect our homeland. We only have to keep trying." She switched hands and thrust with her left, but could only do so to a count of 45. So Kara switched back to her right, which was already sore from use. "I shall keep trying," he projected back to her. "As long as you are beside me, I shall keep trying." When she tired of the physical training, Kara laid her weapons on the ground and massaged her arms, and then after a few minutes, she retook her weapons and began thrusting with each arm, one by one, while the other held the shield. By the 5th time around, her clothes were dry. She trained for about 2 hours until her arms felt as limp as leather reins. Exhausted as if she had lifted a great boulder over her head 100 times, she removed her clothes, set them on a rock, and then entered the cool pool to relax. Her breasts were still like a young boy's as she hadn't hit puberty yet. Her 4 sphinx palms tall frame floated about the pool. Kara said, "We should start the time of endurance today." She wasn't sure at first, but the more she thought about it, the more she convinced herself. "Yes, we shall start today." Winfrey moved to the waterside closest to her, and her plump frame cast a shadow over the girl as she spoke. "Since you shall be spending the night here, I suggest that you focus the rest of your time on making a shelter. I shall return to Firedrake and get the remaining supplies we need. I have yet to acquire a tent for myself." She added, "Rest for about another hour and then you should start on your shelter." Winfrey looked up at the sky and shielded her eyes with her hand, and she told her, "There are over 5 hours of sunlight left. I shall return when it is dark." She motioned to the rocks where they had their midday meal and informed her, "I left my flint stone. It is yours now. I shall get a replacement when I return to Firedrake. You shall need to have a fire going before it is dark. Are you sure you want to start the time of endurance tonight? You look exhausted." Kara floated around the pool as she answered, "I do. The others are starting tonight, so I also want to start. I cannot outdo the boys if I lag behind." "I am off then," Winfrey said, then gathered up a few things, and walked up the hill. "Blackfire, be vigilant. There are hungry wild animals out here, and Kara is the right size to fill their stomach." Swimming to the ledge, Kara lifted herself a little out of the water, and then she called, "Winfrey." She stopped near the top of the hill, turned, and shouted back, "Yes, what is a child? I forgot to tell you, thank you. Thank you for believing in me and Blackfire. No one else does, and it is good to at least have one person on our side. No thanks needed. I see great things coming from you too, and you do not need anyone to tell you that," Winfrey told her, beaming with pride, and then she turned again and walked over the hill and out of sight. Blackfire slipped into the water and joined Kara in the pool. They relaxed for about half an hour. "Let us start on our shelter," Kara told him as she got out of the pool and shook off what water she could before dressing. Her clothes clung to her wet body. Kara went up to the top of the next hill and looked over the desert land as she questioned, "What shall we make it out of? There are no trees or... I do not see anything to build it out of." "I do not know," he projected. "What material is there in the desert?" She looked at her feet and then answered, "Rocks and sand." Blackfire glanced back around the valley and noticed a patch of discolored rock along the cliff side. He non-verbally asked, "What if we dig a hole in the side of clay rock? It would not collapse on us and would give us some protection from the desert cold if we put a fire in front of it." I think that is a wonderful idea, Kara told him as she noticed the claystone her hatchling referred to. You shall start digging a hole for us, and I shall see if I can gather enough supplies to keep a fire going through the night. She started collecting dead desert plants that were lying about, from grasses to cactuses. They were scattered around the area and over the next hill. He dug into the side of the cliff with his claws, and within a half hour, he dug out a small cave big enough for the two of them to sleep in comfortably. Kara gathered a large pile of dead plants and stacked them near their shelter. Blackfire picked out what clay he could from his claws before he went and washed his talons in the pool. He was about to slip back into the water when Kara spoke to him. We cannot take a break yet. We still have to find what we are going to eat for dinner. There is not much out here. You shall have to hunt while I get a fire going. Maybe you can catch a couple of desert hares. One would be enough for me. I thought I saw some from the third hill looking over the flatlands. He projected, I shall see what I can find. Blackfire spread his wings, lifted up into the air, and flew off as Kara made a pile of kindling, then took the flint stone Winfrey had given her, and created a spark. She was used to making fires with flintstone, as that was part of her duties when she was a slave for Bork. At least her life as a slave had some use. Kara created a small fire and waited for her hatchling to return before making the fire any bigger for cooking. She needed to conserve the fuel. A hot, dry breeze swept over her nearly dried hair, and with it came an eerily familiar presence. She thought she heard someone call her name, but no one was there. The same breeze circled the valley and came back like a haunting specter, and blew over her again. Kara. The voice spoke. She grabbed her spear and shield, and then she stood. The voice came from atop the cliffside. Kara turned and faced it, but couldn't see its top. She took a few steps back, still searching its top. The breeze returned again and blew up inside her shirt and then over her face. She didn't know what was going on and wished for Blackfire's return. Her heart pounded in her chest, and she wanted to flee, but Kara wasn't sure which direction the surmised danger came from. It seemed to be all around her. Kara. She whirled around with her spear and found Blackfire standing behind her with 3 dead hares in his talons. He non-verbally asked her, Kara, is something wrong? You are pale. Do you feel sick? No. She started, and then she stared at him for a few seconds and lowered her spear. I thought I heard someone. No one else is here. I scanned the area while I was in the air. Are you sure you are all right? I am fine. I see you were able to catch some hares. Yes, he replied as he gave one to her. Though, because of their size, they are harder to catch than deer. Blackfire started to sink his teeth into one. But then he looked at her and noticed her gaze was distant, as if she were somewhere else. So he questioned her again. Are you sure you are fine? She shook off her distraction and then answered him, yes. Let us eat. He took the other 2 hares some distance away from their shelter, knowing that she didn't like watching him eat when blood and raw flesh were part of his dragonly cuisine. Blackfire lay down with his back to her, and it didn't take him long to rip into the first one. Kara lifted the furry creature he had given her and realized she didn't have a knife to gut the rodent. All she had was a fake spear and a wooden shield. I guess I'll have to wait for Winfrey to return before I can eat, Kara mumbled to herself as she walked over to the fire and sat beside it, and then she looked over at her hatchling as he finished off the second hare. Are you still hungry? She questioned him. 2 cannot be enough for a hatchling your size. I am, but these were the only hares that I could find. I do not mind sharing. We both need to eat. Here, Kara said as she threw her hare to him, and he caught it with his talon. She said, eat. Winfrey shall not be back for another 3 hours, and I have nothing to skin and gut the beast. Kara lied, saying, I am not hungry yet. I shall eat a little bit of something when Winfrey returns. We shall officially begin our time of endurance tomorrow. I think it shall be okay since we did not know of the time of endurance, and we have none of our survival items with us. He didn't argue the point and greedily ate the last hare. Chapter 9. The Lost Young Courier and His Dragon. The sun neared the last 2 hours of its day trek as Blackfire slipped back into the pool. But Kara decided that she wouldn't swim again, not wanting to go to bed with wet hair. She sat near the fire and fed it a little to keep it going. Kara stared at the flames and relaxed. Her eyes drooped, and she started to nod off when she thought she heard her name again. She snapped as a large shadow moved across the valley, and Kara glanced up and saw the underbelly of a great beast. She stood and told her pair, it is a dracoman and a dragon. Who could it be? Blackfire opened his eyes when he heard the other beast's flapping wings as he floated on his back half asleep in the refreshing pool. When he heard her identify them as Dracomin and his pair, he sleepily closed his eyes, and then he projected, "Do you recognize them?" The rider and dragon came back for another pass and kicked up a slight torrent as the dragon flew across the valley a little lower. "I do not," Kara replied as she shielded her eyes, and then she questioned aloud, "Why are they out here? Are they here to tell us we cannot participate in the time of endurance? What should we do? Should we hide? They have already seen us," he projected. The majority of his murky black frame floated below the surface, and only the top of his head was out of the water. He questioned her, what good would it do to hide? The dragon circled the valley a few times and then landed among the Vim crystals, and the rider dismounted. The dragon was a little smaller than Zephyr, so Kara thought that would most likely put him at near adult. The color of his hide was a normal dragon brown as she expected, and his rider was clean-cut and at least 5 years older than her as Kara expected. She started toward them as her hatchling continued to float about the pool. Blackfire had nearly fallen asleep again, weary from his training. She was too far away to make out the coat of claws on the Dracomin's vest, so she walked a little closer and at first, she thought there was no crest, but then she saw the coat of claws of a red wingless dragon. "Are they here to scold us?" Blackfire projected as he opened one eye, still refusing to leave the refreshing pool. He could somewhat see the new arrivals, but he didn't have a clear view of them. "I do not know. They are not from Firedrake," she projected back. "I do not recognize the coat of claws." Blackfire swam to the ledge and pulled himself out as he questioned, "Who could they be?" "I do not know. Maybe they are a courier from another nest," Kara replied, and then she yelled to the newcomers, "Who are you? You ask my name and yet you have not told me yours," the man yelled back. "Forgive my manners. I am AabiLynn and this is Blackfire." "I'm Escout and this is Dracon," he replied, and then he bowed. "If we may, we have come to quench our thirst at your pool." "Of course, come and take of the water," Kara told them. She observed them as Escout grabbed a water boda hooked onto the harness of his beast, and then he and Dracon made their way towards the pool. The dragon's bulky weight rumbled the ground as he walked, and Kara thought that was a bit odd. Escout eyed her as much as she eyed them. He noted the clothes she wore and her malformations, and then he searched the area as if looking for someone else and tried to do so without her taking note. She didn't notice as she watched Dracon cautiously make his way behind his rider as if he was unsure how Blackfire would react to his presence. She kept eyeing the beast, trying to figure out why he was so heavy. He wasn't even an adult yet. Maybe he projected some sort of spell that made him stronger and somehow bulkier. "Dracon, did you cast some sort of spell on yourself?" Kara asked as she started toward them to meet them before they walked halfway to the pool. She waited for his reply, but the brown dragon never answered her. He only gazed at her curiously. Kara turned to Escout and questioned him, "Why does he not answer me? He looks old enough to speak." She panicked a bit as she thought that she might have offended him as so many others had offended her, and she stated, "Not that there is anything wrong with him not speaking if he is unable to yet." "Dracon doesn't verbally speak for his species cannot," he replied. She asked, "Is Dracon not an Athenia dragon?" Escout laughed before he answered, "No, he isn't an Athenia dragon, and to answer your earlier question, he didn't cast an spell upon himself." "Why do you believe there is magic on him?" "The way the ground shakes," she replied. "He moves heavier than he looks." "I see, so it was a physical thing that led you to your hypothesis." "That is most interesting," Escout stated as he continued on. But his beast stopped and gazed at her. She neared the brown dragon, seemingly called to him as she inquired, "I am wrong then?" "Dracon is different," and Kara reached out her hand to stroke him as she finished, "has an unusual allure about him." Turning as he sensed his pair wasn't as close as he should be, Escout saw Kara and realized what the girl was about to do, so he raised his hand to give warning when Dracon leaned over and stuck his head in her palm. A coo leaked out of his mouth, followed by a lick to her face. Escout had been so sure that growls and warning snaps would have fended off her touch. She rubbed his smooth hide as she stated, "His skin feels like I imagined it, but not as dry as Blackfire's, and it is also smoother." Blackfire projected, "My skin would be smooth too if you would oil it more often." Kara smiled at her hatchling's comment. Escout wiped away the astonished look from his face and laughed again. He questioned her, "Did you say beauty? You must be mistaken. You can't be speaking of my horrid beast, but then again, what would you know?" I am, Kara insisted, and then she questioned him. Do you not see it? He is your pair. She petted Drakon a few more times, then stepped back from him, and said, I see it in all dragons. They are all magnificent beasts. Do you now, even in Athenia dragons? Scout inquired, and then he said without waiting for an answer, speaking of which, I bet the one in the pool is one. He directed his next comments to the hatchling. Are you one of the trainees from Firedrake? He is, Kara spoke for her hatchling. He must be a 3rd or 4th year trainee, Scout stated as he glanced around the area. And then he questioned, Attendant, where is his rider? I am not an attendant. Kara snapped. Did you believe all of this time you were talking to A? She calmed herself, realizing it wasn't the Dracoman's fault. Blackfire was huge for his age and in the rider's eyes. She was too young to be an older dragon's pair. She stood there for a few moments, trying not to let his erroneous observation bother her. Now even strangers were underestimating her. Kara calmed herself a bit, and then she explained to him, I am his rider, and we are both plebes. Really, and here I was waiting all this time for his rider, and you've been here the entire time. For the most part, she ignored Scout, trying to rein in her anger. She kicked a rock near her barefoot, and it went flying into the pool. Small ripples marked the point of entry as her outrage eased a bit, and she said, You know of Firedrake, so you must know of Dragon Elder Durin. I know him by name only, Scout replied, and then he turned and faced Blackfire. I can't believe he is only a plebe. Your hatchling is a large one. Dragon Elder Durin said he is the largest he has ever seen, Kara spoke, and then she added with pride, he might be the largest Athenia dragon ever born. You don't say, Scout said as he took a few steps and then bent to the pool, and his beast followed. He filled his water boat as Drakon took of the water, and Scout questioned, How far is Firedrake from here? About 3 hours by foot, Kara replied as she pointed in its direction. I'm close then. I was having problems finding it, he stated as he straightened, walked toward the Vim crystals, and waved as he went. Thank you for the directions and for allowing us to interrupt your day. It was no bother, Kara said. Small stones tumbling from the nearby cliff and landing around the pool brought Scout's attention skyward, and he turned and noticed a Venetian red scribe walking out to the edge. The scribe bent and sat with his feet dangling, and then he removed his blazing quill and convey scroll from his satchel. Expositus. Hatchlings commanded softly, and his scroll unrolled and floated in front of him. He was so sure he had lost Kara and Blackfire, but luckily, he noticed their attendant had walked from this direction. Hatchlings looked over the desert from his lofty point, and he was glad that he climbed up there. He had a very good view of everything, and he began writing. In the valley, Scout saw that the girl noticed his own diverted gaze, then quickly took of the water from the boda, and said, This pool is quite refreshing. Why are you two here? She started to turn to see what he had been looking at, but when he questioned her, she focused on him and his inquiry. She answered him, We are participating in the time of endurance. Blackfire projected, Are you sure that we should be telling this stranger these things? Should we not be more cautious? Kara projected back, I guess I should not be so trusting. I shall be more cautious with my words. She asked Scout, trying to change the subject, if Drakon is not an Athenia dragon. What kind of dragon is he? Scout looked at his beast before he stated, I never said he was a dragon. He's a herptile. Scout turned back to her, glimpsed a confused expression span her face, and then questioned her, Don't know what that is. Well, the people of this country have a different name for him. He paused, and then he questioned himself, Now, what do they call him? Not a dragon. Kara gazed at Drakon as Scout's words made her feel uncomfortable. She didn't see anything rise within the brown dragon that would give her warning. But his rider was a different matter. She witnessed a mask of deceit seemingly fall away from the Dracoman's face. She turned her attention back to the dragon, and then she picked up something unusual about Drakon, so she squinted as if her vision had been blurred and took a second look. The image of the dragon flickered like that of a desert mirage that appeared for only an instant. There was another image in that flicker before her view returned to what she had originally perceived. She couldn't make out the image within the flicker. It had been too fast. Kara experienced the same sensation she had when Blackfire had gone hunting and left her alone. Her pair sensed her trepidation and projected to her, Something does not feel right. Kara, come closer to me. She didn't move, as if frozen in place as the flicker occurred again, and the image within stayed a split second longer. It appeared that Drakon possessed 2 sets of wings when she saw the other beast in her distorted vision. Scout still muttered to himself, and she distinctly heard the name they call the Herptiles a little more sinister. Kara took 1 step sideways toward her pair as the image flicker happened a 3rd time. She beheld Drakon's true form. He had ebony hide that looked like black onyx in the dwindling sunlight. She saw the 2 sets of wings again and that his head was rounded like a serpent's. What frightened her the most was that Drakon was 5 times the size he had been moments earlier. She turned to Scout, and the image he wore like a costume was also gone. He was no longer clean-cut, but he sported a full beard with a braid on each side of his mouth. She started to run for Blackfire. "I remember," Scout exclaimed as he moved between her and her hatchling, cutting them off from one another. "They call Herptiles Leviathans." Kara stopped mid-stride when the man blocked her as if a freezing spell had been placed upon her. She didn't know what to do or say, and she felt her hatchling's fear. Blackfire ready to pounce on the man. "I can tell you're thinking about this situation." "Yes, I can tell that you're working that little mind of yours," Scout spoke as he lifted his hand and summoned a staff from thin air. It was wooden and had a red gem fastened to it by metal claws. He stomped his staff along the orange-yellow sand, making circle indentions that seemed to flash like broken mirrors in the sunlight. Scout stated, "If Drakon is a Leviathan, doesn't that make me a warlock?" The answer, of course, is yes. I'm one of the Stygian Legion. Perhaps you have heard of a scout flying through your lands. Kara shook her head slightly. "No, and here I put on a performance to fool you into thinking we were the couriers from Yang. Drakon did enjoy them, and I hope to enjoy fooling you. It is too bad. The elders should have informed you, and then maybe you wouldn't have been so trusting of strangers. I am surprised you saw through our disguise even if it was only a little. My magic creates a complete illusion and covers all the senses, and yet you perceived past a few of them." He grabbed her right wrist as he ordered, "Drakon, take out the hatchling. But don't kill him right away. We will have some fun before we leave." Blackfire leapt for Scout as the Leviathan rushed forth, and Drakon tackled him before he reached the warlock. His attack was so forceful he sent Blackfire hurling into the pool. Water splashed on Scout and Kara. The Leviathan stood on the ledge of the pool, and when the hatchling surfaced, he reached down his talon and shoved the much smaller beast back under. Drakon was nearly 15 times the size of Blackfire and had no problems keeping him under. "Let go of me," Kara screamed as she struggled against the warlock's hold. "Let go of me." Scout turned and watched his beast have his fun as he stated, "Your hatchling will make a fine prize for me. I need proof that I entered the land of Athenia and have yet to come across the right trophy, and with my prize, I'll prove my gall and worthiness to move up in the ranks of the Legion." Drakon continued to hold the hatchling under as he mind-synced with the warlock and projected, "Isn't the dragon a bit too big to bring back as a prize?" Kara heard the Leviathan within her mind. "Not his head," Scout replied, and then he spoke to the girl. "Now, what to do with you?" On the cliff above, Hatchlings stood as the warlock and Leviathan's magical camouflage fell away. He wasn't sure what he should do. He was an observer, but to just watch as the young ones were slaughtered was unthinkable. Some distance away, Winfrey led a horse-drawn cart, heading back to those who were in her care. She noticed the sun descending in the sky and hurried her pace. If she quickened it enough, she might be back to camp before dark just as she promised. In the valley, snatching her arm away from the warlock, Kara rushed over to her shield and spear. She picked them up, then turned, and faced her enemy. By King Viz himself. Scout uttered, and then he questioned her, "Are you going to face me with practice weapons? You do know that they'll not repel magic, and I doubt the spear can even pierce flesh, let alone my clothes or the Leviathan's hide." He raised his staff, the gem on top glowed dark red, and he started to call upon his magic as he questioned her, "What do you think you're going to do?" Kara glanced at Drakon as he drowned her hatchling, so she turned and hurled her spear at the Leviathan. Drakon caught it and easily broke it in half with his claws. Her heart sank, seeing the futility of her actions. "You are a brave one," Scout said as he moved for her. "Brave and soon to be dead." The gem on his staff glowed even brighter and became like Blackfire as he stated, "Your scalp will also look nice on my Leviathan's harness." The end. Next, AabiLynn's Dragon Rite number 3. Magic as sharp as swords.